All right. All right, Becky, are we live? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Brevard City Council regular meeting of Monday, May 5th. I want to welcome this amazingly large group that has come out this evening to join us in person. That is wonderful. That is what local government is all about, so it's great to see you. And I also want to welcome everybody that is watching us on the live stream. So as we begin, I want to introduce the people sitting up here. On my far right, we have our city attorney, Mac McKellar. Next to Mac, we have Councilman Lauren Wise. Next to Lauren, we have Councilwoman Pamela Holder. Next to Pamela, we have Councilman Mac Morrow. I'm Mayor Maureen Kopoloff. On my immediate left, we've got our city clerk, Denise Hodgson. Next to Denise, we've got Councilman and Mayor Pro Tem, Gary Daniel. Next to Gary, we've got Councilman Aaron Baker. And next to Aaron, we have our city manager, Wilson Hooper. And I believe we've got the Reverend Elizabeth Rolls here from St. Phillips Episcopal Church. Welcome, Reverend, who is going to give us the invocation this evening.
Good evening, everyone. So I am from St. Phillips Episcopal Church, and recently St. Phillips on May 1st celebrated the feast day for St. Philip, who is our patron saint. So I thought I would tell you a word about St. Philip. So we are named after the Philip in the Gospels, who was a disciple, not the one that you find in the book of Acts. And so Philip was one of the followers of Jesus during Jesus's ministry. And I like to say about Philip, I like to use the metaphor, a sports metaphor, which I don't often use, but I do with Philip, that Philip liked to make assists. He liked to pass the ball to Jesus so Jesus could score. So we find in lots of different situations in the Gospels where Philip does something that helps Jesus either teach or perform a miracle. For example, Philip, there along the Sea of Galilee, went and found Nathanael and invited Nathanael to come and see. And we like to use that phrase at St. Philip's, come and see, to come and see who Jesus is. And then another time, you might remember the feeding of the 5,000. Well, in John's gospel, Philip is the one who says, we're never going to be able to feed all these people. We don't have enough money to go and buy bread for them. And that sets Jesus up to perform this miracle of the multiplication of the fish and the loaves. So let us remember Philip and remember that we too are called to assist one another and to assist our God in making this world a place for all people to live and to thrive. Let us pray. Almighty God, who gave to your apostle Philip grace and strength to bear witness to the truth, grant that we, being mindful of his victory and faith, may glorify in life and death the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Would you like to tell us a little bit about St. Philip's?
Well, I could say come and see. Come and see St. Philip's. We have worship services on Sundays at 8 o'clock and 10:30. We have an education hour, a formation hour for children and youth and adults at 9:15. We have a wonderful community that likes to support our community, and it's a great place to be. So come and see.
Well, thank you, and we are so appreciative of everything that St. Philip's does for the community. We know you're very active, your congregation, so thank you. All right, if everyone would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, honor, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you have a quorum. All members are present.
Okay. Council members, you have the draft agenda in front of you. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is approved. Council, you've got the draft minutes of the March 7th, 2025 priority setting retreat. Are there any corrections or modifications to those minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. All right, this time we are going to have public comment.
Just a second, we have a late arriver.
Oh, well, we want everybody to have a chance to sign up, so I'll read the instructions. All right. The public is invited to speak during public comment at this time on any topic unless it is a public hearing item on the agenda. And we actually have 3 public hearings on the agenda, and they had separate sign-up sheets. Anyone who wants to speak must register with the city clerk, which is what this list is. When it is your turn, step to the podium in front of city council, state your name and address clearly, limit comments to 3 minutes or less, and avoid repetition. I will give you a warning when you have 30 seconds left. Direct comments to the full council, not to an individual council member or to staff, and groups are encouraged to appoint a spokesperson on their behalf. I will call people up in the order in which you signed. Our first speaker is Peter Rossi.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Go ahead and start with a quote. I'm proud of how our police department operates. I'm proud how we have been proactive in working to make it competitive. That is a quote from our mayor during your last closing remarks at the last meeting. 2 days later, a lawsuit was filed against the chief of police and the city manager for retaliatory firing of a sergeant with an unblemished 12-year career who reported missing evidence in the police evidence room that he was setting up an organizational system for an evidence room that had not been audited since 1996. They also tried to have this police officer's credentials stripped from him, but the state saw no evidence of wrongdoing to relieve him of his credentials. Was leaked to the press. The police chief stated no one told him about the missing evidence after he'd started the disciplinary action against the sergeant for advising him for the missing evidence through his attorney and the Police Benevolent Association. This is who the mayor is proud of. You protest the rights of people while your police chief and city manager are being sued for violating someone's constitutional rights. This is who you are proud of. In 2023, a survey, only 12% of the officers felt heard in the department and 6% felt supported. The department lost good officers because of a toxic work environment, including accusations of sexual harassment. Our department is short around 10 to 12 officers, causing the Brevard Police Department to have to ask the county to cover the city during the night shift. They also cannot cover Brevard College during events and had to cancel a 5K run. This is who the mayor is proud of. I am proud how we have been proactive in working to make it competitive. Nothing you have done for the department has been proactive. It has all been reactive to fill the gaps that the toxic work environment has created. Even some council members have tried to tout the good work that they have done. Quit lying to us and quit blowing smoke up our butts. This is not true. This has all been reactive stuff to try to rebuild the police force that this toxic environment has created. And is because of the actions of the chief of police and the city manager and the council for letting this happen. Continuing to employ a police officer with credibility issues can be problematic for law enforcement agencies and prosecutors. That is
30
correct.
seconds,
That is the
Mr.
quote from the
Rossi.
city manager. I agree with you on that. That is a very good quote. And I say you should fire the police chief and the board should fire the city manager for causing the toxic work environment that is hampering our police force. Thank you. And I have a copy of the lawsuit.
Our next speaker is Teresa Wyn. Ms. Wyn?
My name is Teresa Wyn. I live at 105 Hillview Circle. I've been living there a while, but what I want to ask is, I know we pay taxes, but why, it's still in the same area, why city and county? Separate this, why don't they just put it together? You know, some people can't afford to do that. And a lot of them lose their homes. And it's not fair. Because the ones that can afford it end up buying them out or selling to somebody out of the state. You know, it's like most of the stuff we have here in this county, the gas company sold out, Duke Power sold out, they went somewhere else, and most of them changed their name. So we losing. That's why if we don't have, if we ain't got enough money, how can we dig, there's more sidewalks and roads dug up, and the city had to pay for that. We didn't ask them to do that when the roads and stuff was already there. Been there for years. I've been here all my life. It's just, I'm concerned about that. And it ain't fair to, I put it like this, it ain't fair to the poor and the middle class. The other ones got theirs together. And I just want to know why. If we paying all these taxes, where is all the money going? You know, it's a question that should be answered. That's all I got to say. I just want to ask that question.
Thank you, Ms. Wyn. You know, we don't answer here tonight, but you'll get an answer. All right. Our next speaker is Stephen Keat. Keat.
Good evening, Mayor Kopoloff and City Council members. My name is Stephen Keat, and I live at 269 Evergreen Street in Brevard. I'm here tonight to urge you to reconsider the direction of your progressive agenda, an agenda transforming Brevard into a shadow of Asheville. Here are a few of your policy decisions that I find particularly troubling. First, allowing open outdoor drinking on city streets has normalized public alcohol consumption, changing the family-friendly atmosphere of Brevard. Second, prioritizing bike trails over basic infrastructure, like fixing potholes on city streets and repairing sinkholes impacting private property, neglects the practical needs of residents. Third, removing downtown parking spaces for aesthetic purposes has impacted local businesses. I'm also concerned about the rise in homeless encampments you've allowed to take hold in our community. Additionally, your recent public statements, perceived as welcoming to illegal aliens, have made it more likely that they'll move here. Meanwhile, you're pursuing big government solutions, putting taxpayers on the hook to solve housing issues that should be left to the private sector. Even the growth of hemp and cannabis retail outlets, while legal, represent a significant departure from Brevard's traditional values. But nowhere is the impact of your priorities more alarming than on the Brevard Police Department. Public safety should be the highest priority of local government. Yet our police department continues to be understaffed, putting a strain not only on Brevard's police officers, but also on the county sheriff's office as they try to help. The recently filed lawsuit against the city underscores other potentially serious internal challenges, issues that cannot be ignored. Our officers and the public deserve leadership that prioritize keeping our streets safe. Mayor and council, I ask you to pause this agenda. Listen to the residents who've cherished Brevard for its small town nature, not those who see it as a testing ground for progressive experiments. Redirect your focus to practical solutions. Strengthen our police force. Protect the taxpayers. Repair our roads. Support our businesses and restore the values that make Brevard home. Please protect what makes this city special. Do not chase a vision that risks making it unrecognizable. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Keat. Our next speaker is Paula Hartmanstein.
Hello, good evening. I'm Paula Hartmanstein. I'm your age-friendly coordinator of the city of Brevard. I live at 249 Pine Mountain Trail. And I'll start, and thank you for allowing this public comment time. Did you know that 2.5% of every North Carolina driver's license fee that we all pay goes to the North Carolina License to Give Trust Fund? I learned that a few months ago. And with those fees, they provide free workshops to communities who just simply ask them. And I heard the speaker at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and was wowed by her. Her name is Heather Altman. And so we are having a free to the public advanced care planning workshop on Wednesday, May 28th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at the library. And this is for all ages. In fact, I hope my millennial son will come because we need to do this for him, not just for us oldsters. The topics that will be covered include what is involved in advanced care planning, why it's important, the North Carolina Advanced Care Planning forms, and an opportunity to complete the forms right then and there and have them notarized and to upload and store these planning documents using what's called Mind My Health, a safe digital platform. And just as an aside, as many of you who know me know, I'm from Ohio, and I asked the question of the speaker, we have, planning these documents from Ohio. Do we have to do them? Are they valid in North Carolina? Her answer was maybe. And she said, so if you're from another state, you should get them done here in North Carolina. So this is something age-friendly Brevard is sponsoring along with AARP. I hope you all come. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, folks, there's plenty of seats. I see a number of people just standing. Please feel free, come on in. We've got seats over here. You're not going to disrupt anything. Come on in. We've got seats in the front. Come on, Rodney, over here. You can sit down. Okay. All right. We got plenty of seats. Come on in and sit down. That way you can actually hear better. All right. Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to our next speaker. That is Ron Young.
My name is Ron Young, and I live at 77 Caden Lane here in Brevard. And I'm here, first I want to thank all the people on the council and the mayor for letting the public in here to discuss different topics. I think that's a really good thing for city councils to do, and I appreciate it. I'm here to talk about a development that's going in just off of Brevard Street, and I've got a little flyer I made up, and I'm going to hand it out to each one of you so you kind of know what I'm talking about. And after the council meeting's over with, you can take it home and throw it in the trash if you want, or you might want to keep it as a souvenir. But I just thought this would give you a little bit of early recognition about what I'm here for. So.
Thank you.
The development is 11 and a half acres just off of Probart, right behind Caden Lane. And they're going to be putting in 68 homes there. And I think that's a very high density development. And we're all worried about it, that people that live up and down on Probart, and especially people on Caden Lane that I know, the area I think is susceptible to a lot of water coming off it. If you do the math on it, a 1-inch rain on 11 acres produces 300,000 gallons of water. So if you multiply that by 5 or 10 inches of rain, you've got a massive amount of water coming off of that hill, which they're going to flatten out and take all the trees off of. So I think that's just very dangerous for our neighborhood. And according to the Brevard land use plan, we're supposed to be preserving steep slopes and natural areas, which that area, I believe, certainly falls into that type. We also want to limit the size and scope of new developments. That's in your plan for Brevard, and I don't think that type of development is limiting in any way. So if it was a lower density development, I still wouldn't like it, but I could understand it, and I think it would be a lot better for our community. When you look at the number of vehicles, and I got this from the city planner herself,
30 seconds.
650 more vehicles going up and down Probart every day. And that is a massive amount of traffic trying to go through downtown or turning left there on Railroad. I don't know how that's going to work. I just don't think it can. So I hope that people here will get involved with this and find out what's going on. I do realize tax base and businesses do need more population.
Time, Mr.
Okay.
Young.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Rainree. Did I get that right? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Laura Rainree, and I live at 70 Caden Lane. And I too appreciate the opportunity to come and speak before the council to voice concerns about this new neighborhood that we just found out about called Burl Haven. Again, 11 and a half acres behind our house, our lane on Caden Lane. But the history of the area was that John Taylor, who owns Opie Taylor's, petitioned the city like 30 years ago to do a bump out, right, of our traditional downtown high-density area, which is supposed to be a 1 mile perimeter from downtown. So when you look on the city website, it shows that perimeter, and then it shows just this tiny little bump out for Caden Lane and the adjoining property. So he had planned a development. And I lived there, and my neighbors lived there, and we have like 8 houses on the street. So even though it might have been deemed high density back 30 years ago, that's the nature of our neighborhood. And our neighborhood is uniquely positioned on Probart Street on the other side of the county extension. So when you go down Probart, you jump into county around the Brevard Music Center, and after you pass through a very rural area with 2 intact old farms, it comes back into city. So our street's the first street in the city limits, and we pay city taxes. Then you have Dr. Nash's office, and then you have the Hillview or the Crest Public Housing Development, and then you hit Cashers Valley. So what we found out about through the sale from a realtor who's like, hey, we sold the property behind your house, is that some developer from Florida has drawn up plans to squeeze 68 homes in this 11 and a half acres between us and the Crest Public Housing Development. And we met with the city planner 10 days ago to show us the plan so we could understand what was going on. And they did say that from their math that they give 10 trips a day per home. So that's 680 car vehicle trips increased on Probart. Whether it goes out Cashers Valley or out towards Caldwell and Railroad, that's a tremendous increase in traffic. The other problem is that part of Probart, even though we were bumped out and included in the city limits, is a state road. So we have no sidewalks, we have no bike lane. And so I think, we're concerned because we went through the 10-year public commentary of building the comprehensive land.
30 seconds.
And we're just asking that this development be viewed in the lens of those goals that were put in there for preserving community integrity in neighborhoods. Ducktown is a neighborhood, it's rural, that, we want livable, healthy communities where people have multi-modes of transportation. There is no way to safely walk or bike on that part of Probart. And it's gonna just incredibly increase the pressures for this small rural area and for the Rosenwald community. So we're really asking for help and for guidance.
Time, Ms. Rainree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Bruce Gleeman.
Hi, my name is Bruce Gleeman. I'm from Pisgah Forest, and this is chapter 2 of a book that I'm going to start. There's 85 chapters to the book, so it's about the treatment plant, okay? I want to thank the mayor for the email you sent on the project and on the wastewater treatment plant and the direction that's going in the future for flow and also elimination of the smells. And I also want to thank Wilmar of the North Carolina Division of Water Resources, which sent me the permit limits of the treatment plant and also the current violations. Okay, finding the cause of the hydrogen sulfide and emissions is a hard thing to solve. And the program that's coming up is going to help do that for the community. And the current engineer that is driving this down there, he's top-notch. He exactly knows what needs to be done. But the one factor that he needs is cash. You got to give him money to make it happen, okay? So through the plant expansion, you're going to have a lot more input, and it's going to impact the community even more through flow through the plant and also smells. So as you speed up, there's probably maybe smells or not, so you have to get the handle around it before than after. So I hope the city council keeps the people impact as a focal point, because the state says what you discharge to the French Broad River is what your permit is. Your smells are not, okay? You can smell all you want down there, and they're not going to come after you. I want to thanks again for listening to this, and I hope Brevard can keep it as a great place to visit. And I hope people that come to visit says, what's that smell? We don't want that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gleeman. All right, our next speaker is Scott Clerk.
No, skip. Just sign the paper. We're good.
Okay, all right. This is your one opportunity, first time here. Okay, all right, come back, okay. Our next speaker is Peter Reeves.
I'm also here to talk about the same development that's going in behind Caden Lane. There's not much they haven't said. My property address is 79 Caden, and I also have one on 15 Pope, and so I'm in the city and out of the city. And I guess what it doesn't make sense, and that's basically all I could say. I would like you to look at it and see if you would consider making it a low-density area, which I don't know what that number is, but if you drive over there, it's not something that I think the area can contain, and it doesn't really make sense for what Brevard has been about for so many years, and I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reeves. Our next speaker is Hannah Bowers.
Yes, thank you.
I also brought handouts. Hi, I'm Hannah Bowers, and I came to chat about property taxes. I know that this council does not assess property values, but I think it's important that this council understands the effects that assessment is having on members of the city. So we're not going to call it a study because it's not official yet. But basically, I chose 20 properties from the Rosenwald neighborhood. I left out new construction. I chose properties that have been owned by the same person near about as far back as I could get records. So 2014 are the furthest records back that I could get. I noted the new assessed values of those properties and also what they assessed for in 2014. And then I chose 20 properties from the East French Broad neighborhood, so Franklin Street, East French Broad, that side of town. And I did the same thing. I looked at what they assessed for recently, and I looked at what they assessed for in 2014. And then I compared those. And what I found was that the French Broad properties experienced about 169% increase in their property taxes in that 10-year period of time. The Rosenwald community experienced 209%, and those are averages over the 20 properties. That's a pretty big discrepancy. And granted, that's a small sample size, but it does illustrate that gentrification can be quantified. And it is having real effects on our Black neighbors. Then I ran the numbers and I said, okay, if the properties in Rosenwald had experienced that 169% increase, what would the values be like today? And they would be, on average, worth
their tax assessed value would be $25,000 less on average today. If the French Broad homes had increased as much as the Rosenwald neighborhood did, those properties would be worth, on average, $75,000 more than they are today. So again, gentrification can be quantified. It's having real effects on the people that live in these communities and on the city and the county's tax base as well. So at best, the neighbors in the Rosenwald community are paying more than what you might consider to be their fair share in property taxes. We're seeing a shift in property tax. That's right. We're seeing a shift in the property tax burden
30 seconds.
to the Black community. And at worst, they're being displaced. And I think that you have heard and will continue to hear stories about that. There are groups all over the country that are looking at this and deciding to change the way that they assess and the way that they collect taxes. And I think that this reassessment is a really good opportunity to look at the way that we do this and work together to make it more equitable. Because again, small sample size, but I also have looked at larger studies that confirm that this exists. It's very real and it is affecting people in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Our next speaker is Ella Jones.
Good afternoon to the council, Mayor Koploff. My name is Ella Jones, and I live at 86 McMinn Avenue in Brevard. And first of all, I'd like to compliment the young lady that spoke because she voiced my sentiment, and I think the community, the Rosenwald community, feels the same way as the evidence that she looked at was accurate in our feelings. First of all, I read where there was not going to be a property tax imposed in 2025 because the budget had already been set and they had not gone over that. Whether that's true or not, that's what I read. However, there's going to be a property reassessment. In my way of thinking, if they do a reassessment, it's the same thing as the taxes going up. Because the property would be reevaluated and taxed in a different way. So there was supposed to be a reappraisal form sent out, and I guess it was. And it was supposed to be sent out for a reevaluation. I don't know if the property owners got it or not, but that's going to be important. Last year, I came to the council and talked about the people in the Rosenwald community that could not afford to have their taxes to go all up because of money. And I see a trend happening, and I hope that I'm wrong, but my parents a long time ago told me that back in the day, taxes, when they owned property in different areas in the city, and when the property taxes went up so high they could not afford to pay it, they wind up losing their property. So what happens is, what I'm seeing now, if the property keeps going up, people not able to pay for their property tax.
30 seconds.
It's moving us out. So we will no longer have a Rosenwald community. And I'm not just speaking for Rosenwald community, but the city needs to look at what's happening there. And I know that she mentioned gentrification. Yes, it is happening. And we see a lot of communities, because they are in our community because we can't afford it, haven't moved out. And so we no longer have what used to be ours, or culturally speaking, our community.
Time,
So
Ms.
I'm
Jones.
saying, please don't move us out. Give us a chance to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harvey Seni.
Good evening, City Council members and the mayor. I too want to tell everybody in here how these property taxes that you set are going to hurt the middle income and lower income people in this city. I have a few figures here that were given out by the city manager. Take, for instance, this house got appraised in 2025 for $98,000, and now it's appraised at $192,000. That's a 94% increase in the valuation of that house. And as a result, if we use the revenue neutral tax rate, which is 33 cents per $100, that tax rate, and I'll explain what that is, a revenue neutral tax rate is the rate that would keep the countywide tax bill the same in fiscal year 2026 as it was in 2025, despite the change in the tax base. Now, that property, based on 33 cents per $100, their tax rate is going to go up to $632. Last year, they paid $475,000. I'm sorry. The tax rate is going to be $632. Last year, their taxes that they paid is $475. That's a 33% increase in the taxes that they're going to have to pay just on the 33-cent revenue neutral tax rate. And now the city council wants to increase that 33-cent tax rate to 35.75 cents. That's another 8.3% increase tax rate for these people. Total increase for that one household would be 44.3% over last year. There's another one also, appraised last year $311,000, this year $595,000. That's a 48% increase. Fiscal year taxes that they paid last year was $1,495. This year, with the revenue neutral tax rate of 33 cents, they're going to pay $1,963.50. That's
30
a
seconds.
31% increase. A 31% increase, and yet the city council and the mayor want to increase it by another 8.3%. Middle and lower income homes face inflation right now. The people who own those homes, their groceries are going up, their gas is going up. And there's a possibility there are going to be cutbacks in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. There are a lot of these people on fixed income. They can't afford that 8.3% increase that you're proposing.
Time, Mr. Seni. Thank you. Our next speaker is Rodney Fox.
Good afternoon, council. My name is Rodney Fox, and I live at 187 South Rice Street. And I'd like to suggest some budget reductions to avoid a tax increase and implement revenue neutral and help citizens afford to live here. I won't talk about taxes. Harvey and everybody else has done that. Number one is reduce the basic charge on the utility water bill. The basic charge is the amount we pay before we even turn the water faucet on and flush the toilet. It's $55 a month. The question is, how much will the basic charge go up because of improvements to the wastewater treatment plant and infrastructure? If council cannot reduce the basic charge, our only option is to conserve and ration the use of water to reduce our utility bill. Second recommendation is negotiate with DOT the 20% being charged to the city for roundabouts. Roundabouts are not the city's project, and the city should not be charged 20% to help the state. Will the DOT start charging the city to help maintain the state roads? How much will we reduce the budget if this charge is eliminated and/or we not build the roundabouts? Review all your projects. Only consider projects that have the most impact on the community and reduce the citizens' needs. There are 22 projects. I can recommend 9, but only have 3 minutes. I don't think spending $1.2 million on the boardwalk is a necessity. The boardwalk may have to be fixed. It'll be closed, torn down, repaired, and even rebuilt. In the process, people will have created an alternative and will no longer need the new boardwalk. The boardwalk will become a nice-to-have. You didn't recommend economic development, but you should create high-paying job opportunities for residents that exceed the AMI to increase residents' wealth and reduce reliance on municipal assistance. Create jobs and opportunities
30 seconds.
for young people to live here. Diversify your revenue streams. Create a property management division to handle leases, rentals, disposals, and sale and acquisitions of vacant and existing property. Enhance public safety and emergency preparedness, and partner with the county on projects of shared interest. Public safety, police and fire, vehicle maintenance, taxes, traffic control, transportation, economic development, and revenue streams.
Time, Mr. Lux.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is, I think it's Charles Garden. Charles?
My name is Charles Garden, and I live at 69 North Lane. I have an issue that I'd like to address with the council because I haven't been able to get help from anyone else. I've been to the city code enforcement. He sent me to the county code enforcement. I have a new construction been built on my home beside my property, who was given a 2-foot setback line. He has used every bit of the 2-foot setback line, and I have construction debris on my property. I cannot get anybody to address that. Also, I'm here and I'm going to ask this question, and I don't know if anybody else has this golden question, but why are my county taxes higher than my city taxes? I have no explanation for that. But my tax bill was quite a bit higher for my county than it was my city, and I don't understand that. Also, I want to address, Madam Mayor, also about that water drain that's still in my yard. If you come by and look at it, you'll see it's still an issue. And I have been at this for about 5 years. Mr. Wilson came out and said if it's not flooding, we won't worry about it. But it's in my yard. It's in my property, and I would like to have it removed.
Thank you, Mr. Garden. Is that everything? Okay. All right, that is the end of public comment. We will move on to our certificates, awards, and recognition. Okay. We've got 4 proclamations this evening. Our first one is on Historic Preservation Month, and I believe we've got Mr. John Curry, who is the chairman of the Joint Historical Preservation Committee. Did I get that right, John? Yes. Or sort of right, close enough? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. And this is proclamation number 2025, TAC 12, Historic Preservation Month. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing the livability of a community. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas in the city of Brevard, it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. Whereas the city of Brevard has 2 national registered districts of 18 and 23 locally designated local landmarks for Transylvania County. Whereas May has been celebrated as National Historic Preservation Month throughout the United States of America since 1973. Whereas this May there will be a host of events that have been prepared by local historical organizations and co-sponsored by Transylvania County Joint Historic Preservation Commission, whose mission is to help preserve the historic identity of the city of Brevard and Transylvania County. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Maureen Koploff, and the Brevard City Council, do hereby proclaim and recognize the month of May 2025 as Historic Preservation Month. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something about?
I can very quickly.
Please.
May is Preservation Month. There are, as referenced in the proclamation, there are special events and tours going on. Pamphlets can be picked up with those schedules at the Visitor Center and at the Heritage Museum. And also, we at the JHPC has our monthly, actually our annual, we do an offsite, and our regular meeting will be in Champion Park in Rossman on the 13th, where David Whitmire will talk about the role of the river for people throughout time in Pennsylvania County. So it should be interesting, aside from our regular business.
Lots going on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next one is National Bike Month. And I believe we've got several people here. Okay, all right, and you are from the Brevard Bike Alliance, right? And why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Eric Nicoletti.
Okay.
I'm Nora J. Montgomery.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. Proclamation number 2025-16, National Bike Month. Whereas the bicycle is an economical, healthy, convenient, viable, and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent form of recreation and enjoyment of Brevard and Transylvania County's scenic beauty. And whereas Brevard and Transylvania County trails and roads attract bicyclists each year from across the country and the world. And whereas Brevard hosts several major cycling races and events, including the Assault on the Carolinas, the WNC Flyer, and the Pisgah Stage Race. And whereas these bicycling activities and attractions have great potential to have a positive impact on Brevard's economy and tourism industry, as well as to stimulate economic development by making the city attractive to businesses and citizens who enjoy the outdoors and healthy lifestyles. Whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution. Whereas May has been declared National Bike Month since 1956 and is so again in 2025. Whereas the League of American Bicyclists, bicycle clubs, schools, parks and recreation departments, police departments, hospitals, companies, and civic groups throughout North Carolina will be promoting bicycling as a leisure activity as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the automobile during the month of May 2025. Whereas the education of bicyclists and motorists as to the proper and safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all our users. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Maureen Koploff, staff and the Brevard City Council do hereby proclaim and recognize the month of May 2025 as National Bike Month and Bicycle Safety Month. So thank you to the Bicycle Alliance, and you have a batch of events. Do you want to mention some of those?
Sure, yeah. So Brevard Bike Alliance is a community organization, and we work to enhance human-powered transportation. So we also welcome pedestrians, scooters, what have you. We believe that safety and equity and access strengthen our community. So we believe it's a human right to be able to safely walk to school or ride your bike to work. And this month, for Bike Month, we're going to be having a bunch of events to celebrate. We're doing a couple bike ballets where we'll have events where you can ride your bike, and we'll park it and watch it for you this weekend, and also at White Squirrel Festival. We have Bike to School Day on Wednesday this week. We're very excited with 5 different schools. And we'll celebrate Bike to Work Day next week. So swing by Clemson Plaza, get a free coffee on your way to work. And we're also doing a Ride of Silence. So check out our website or our social media for more information, and we hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Well, that's great. So many wonderful activities. All right. Our next one is National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. And I believe we've got Lieutenant Brent Sorrells from our Brevard Police Department coming up. Good to see you. Proclamation 2025 TAC 13, National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day 2025. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated that there be a National Law Enforcement Officers Week, and whereas the members of the law enforcement agencies of North Carolina play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedom of the citizens of the state. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Brevard Police Department and the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 37th Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. Whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the problems, duties, and responsibilities of their law enforcement officers and agencies, and that members of those agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence or disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. Whereas the citizens of Brevard recognize and appreciate the contributions made by law enforcement officers at all levels of government. Now therefore, I, Mayor Maureen Kopoloff, and the Brevard City Council call upon all citizens to observe Thursday, May 15, 2025, as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and May 11th through 17th, 2025, as National Police Week in Brevard, North Carolina, and that all of our people join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities. In so doing, they have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. And on behalf of the elected officials and the citizens of Brevard, thank you so much for everything that our police officers do. We know it's not an easy job. We know it's a tough job, but we also know you are out there protecting us day in and day out. And it's a shame that we have to have a Memorial Day for any peace officer. But we do appreciate their sacrifice, and we will recognize and commemorate. So, thank you very much. Okay, and our last topic, and I'm going to wait for our clerk to get down here. TAC 14, the 55th Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, May 4th through May 10th, this week. 2025. Whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world. And whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants. And whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. Whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. Whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. Whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the professional municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. Whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of professional municipal clerk. Now therefore I, Maureen Koploff, Mayor of the City of Brevard, do recognize the week of May 4th to May 10th, 2025 as the 56th Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our professional municipal clerk, Denise Hodgson, and to all professional municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Thank you, Denise. I don't know if everybody realizes just how critical Denise's job is. Denise's job is absolutely vital because she is in charge of maintaining all of the official records of the city. So when you need something, when you ask for something, who has to find it? Denise has to find it. All of those information requests you send in, well, we know she's got them all. She has to make sure everything is done legally. Not only that, she's got to keep me on track during these meetings. And when I mess up and when I forget something, she just kicks me into the table. And that's a tough job, but no, she does. It is an incredibly important role because what we do here are the legal proceedings of this municipality, and Denise is ensuring that those are properly recorded, executed, and maintained. So, thank you for everything that you do. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, and we are going to move on to special presentations. Our first presentation tonight is the Transylvania County Tax Collector's Office, who is going to explain how they did the 2025 revaluation of properties. And
Yes, ma'am, I'll kick this off if that's all right. So this is following up on a request you all made at your last meeting to hear from the tax collector's office on the revaluation. When we heard the results, you all were curious to learn a little bit more about it. And so our friends from the county have sent Chris Owen, Transylvania County's reappraisal manager, here today to give a brief presentation on why they performed the revaluation, the methods they used, what are the process for appeals, but also to answer questions or inquiries that you have about the revaluation. So thank you, sir, for being here, and I'll throw it to him.
Good evening, everyone. As Wilson said, my name is Chris Owen. I'm with the Transylvania County Tax Office. I've been with the County Tax Assessor's Office about 10 years. I've been serving as the reappraisal manager for the last 8. Wilson, where are those presentations?
There's the PDF.
So obviously, Transylvania County just went through a 2025 reappraisal. This is a state requirement. It's a state statute. North Carolina General Statute 105-286 requires that all counties in the state of North Carolina reset property values at least once every 8 years. Transylvania County has moved to a 4-year cycle, as have most counties in the state, and that has been at the recommendation of the Department of Revenue. And the thought behind that is that if we only reset property values once every 8 years, a lot of things can happen in the market in an 8-year period. So by trying to move to a shorter cycle, we're trying to actually capture that market value in a more accurate fashion. And by doing it more regularly, hopefully, when you get that assessment, you won't see the sticker shock like what almost all folks saw for this reassessment in 2025. I know as our office was putting those values together, we were shocked at what the neighborhood rates were having to go to actually try and capture where those sales were coming in at. So one of the things that we have to do for the reassessment is we have to develop a schedule of values. That's another requirement by state statute. That schedule of values has to be submitted to the county commissioners for their review. It's also open to the public for 3 weeks while the county commissioners review it. If any citizen looks at that schedule and finds an issue with it, you can always contest what's in our county schedule of values. That schedule has everything in there from how we value land versus homes to the statistical measures used during the reappraisal process. It's about 11 or 12 chapter document. It's good reading material if you're looking to go to sleep, to be honest with you. I'm surprised that a lot of folks even have looked at the document. But we did get a lot of feedback, a lot of comments from the taxpayers as we went through the appeal process about our schedule. I know a few folks talked about the property values and whether or not they looked accurate from one neighborhood to another. There is an appeal process, and I encourage everyone who owns property in Transylvania County, go on the county website, look at your property record card. If you have questions about what's on that card, please contact the county tax office. We are more than happy to make corrections when there are errors and when there are mistakes. If you can't find that card online, go on to transylvaniacounty.org in the tax link. Come by our office. More than happy to sit and talk with somebody about that tax card. It'll have all the information about your property as far as the square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, what type of siding's on the house, floor coverings, all that sort of information. And at the end of the day, if our data is accurate, when we reset the rates in these neighborhoods, the goal is so that when those property values increase or decrease, whatever's happening in the market, that gets done equitably for all homes in those neighborhoods. But there's around 30-some thousand parcels in the county. About 18,000 of those parcels are improved or have a home on them or a business or a structure. There are 4 people, including myself, that do this job. So we find errors, where there are mistakes on property record cards. When we come out to review your home, so we look at all the homes in the county on about a 6-year window. At least that's our goal, is to try and make sure we're getting to everybody's neighborhood and house on a 6-year basis. All we can do is knock on your door, ask you questions about the interior. If you're not home, all we can really do is make a lap around the outside of your house, make sure that the measurements and the information that we have on the exterior looks accurate. But we may have inaccurate information about the interior. But if you're not there for us to talk to, then our office just doesn't know that information is wrong. So please, look at your property tax cards. If you see issues and mistakes, bring that to our attention so we can fix those. That appeal process opens up every year in the month of January. So even if you still have time to appeal this year, it's just we're at the formal process now. There's a County Board of Equalization and Review. They convened on April the 28th. So if you wanted to appeal your property valuation, you still have time. That board will not adjourn until May 27th. But there is an informal process where you can just come to the tax office, talk to us about your property value. If we see, mistakes, errors, reasons for adjustment, we absolutely will make those adjustments. We had around 2,000 appeals informally this year after we sent out those reappraisal notices in February. Out of those 2,000, we probably adjusted around 2/3 of those where we had errors, mistakes, or where the taxpayer was able to show us that, hey, these are the sales in my neighborhood. My home is very similar to this house. Why do you have me assessed higher than these homes that sold? Those are always very valid reasons to appeal. Or if you look around your neighborhood, you can go to the county GIS. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but county website, you can go to the GIS map, find your home on that map, and then you can click around all the homes around you and see what they're assessed at. And if you're familiar with those homes in your neighborhood and you see that we have you assessed higher than larger homes or higher quality homes, those are things you want to point out to the tax office so that we can hopefully make those adjustments and be more fair and equitable with your assessment. I've got just a few statistics here from around the county. I know it's kind of hard to see. But basically, these are some of the increases that we saw per fire district in the county. Overall, countywide, the property tax values came in at $11.68 billion for Transylvania County after this 25 reappraisal. That's an unprecedented increase in property tax base for Transylvania County. The prior tax base in 2024, before we did this reassessment, was at about $7.5 billion. So we've increased, over $4 billion in property tax base as a result of this 25 reappraisal. That number has came down some based on those appeals that I mentioned. These were the numbers that were set right after we had finalized our tax base. City of Brevard, just looking at property tax base, is at $1.8 billion right now after the reset. That was a 74% increase on any property that had a home or a structure or a business on it. So, and then the city property values increased around 74%. So if you saw your home value increase more than 74%, that might be a reason for you to take a look at that and see if there might be, something wrong with that property assessment. Obviously, those are averages, so some were higher, some were lower. But if you're over that 74% threshold, I would take a look at that, and you might want to maybe contact our office to see about an appeal. The biggest increase in the county was Lake Toxaway. It's mainly due to the resort areas up in Lake Toxaway Estates, Burlingame. That area saw a 153% increase. If you had an improved property up there, you really saw a big jump in your property assessment for 2025. I have a few other visuals I was going to share with you guys. So as we kind of talked about, Transylvania County has around 29,281 parcels. About 17,895 of those are improved or have a structure on it. There are about 1,600 parcels in the county that are exempt, so about 5% of the properties in our county are receiving a tax exemption. Those would be government-owned properties, churches, homeowners association properties, things of that nature, nonprofit organizations. Some of those folks get property tax exemptions. There's also a tax deferment program, so if you've got a farm or if you've got over 20 acres, you might want to come talk to our office about some of the deferment programs that are available. Basically, if you got at least 10 acres that you're farming, you can see some property tax relief there. If you've got over 20 acres of wooded land or forested land, there are a couple different programs that might be available to you to save on some taxes. So this pie chart is to try and show the different types of construction in the county. So you can see the big blue piece of the pie, which is the majority of it. That is single-family residential homes. So the majority of Transylvania County, as far as the tax base, it's made up of homes, houses, residential homes. You can see the next biggest piece of pie there is in that orangish color. That's manufactured homes. That's mostly double wides and some single wides. As you go on down, the pie pieces get smaller, but you can see it's still condominiums, so more residential property. It's still the next largest part of the tax base or the number of structures in our county. And then you can see office, multifamily, industrial, and commercial get much smaller as you go down the list. So about 82% of the improved parcels in our county are single-family residential homes. Only 3% consist of industrial and commercial property. This is a breakdown of the actual building value that's associated with those types of structures. So once again, if you look at the big blue piece of pie there, $7.18 billion in single-family residential homes. This chart doesn't account for land values. This was just strictly looking at the actual building values themselves. But once again, the majority of the county tax base is made up of residential houses. Only around $380 billion is actually in commercial real estate. Or $380 million, I'm sorry. So I know a few of the folks that stood up and talked about, the differences in different neighborhoods. The county does, we try to delineate all the areas and neighborhoods in the county based on geographic lines, based on the types of homes, or whether it's commercial or residential structures within an area. We've got about 280 neighborhoods for tax purposes. And the goal there is to try and be equitable from one neighborhood to the next. So, we don't want to compare Lake Toxaway and something on the lake up there to something down here in Brevard, on Maple Street. And same thing here around town. We do try to delineate the neighborhoods where there are older homes versus maybe there's, an area of the county or the city around that has more, newer construction. We're always trying to redefine those neighborhoods, for tax purposes to try and avoid inequities in assessment from one neighborhood to the next. This chart just talks about the permits from the last couple of years. Our office is tasked with going out and looking at any improved property that pulls a building permit for additions, remodels, things of that nature. We go out and pick those changes up on those homes throughout the year. This chart kind of shows the actual dollar amount listed on permits over the last few years. Some of the 24 data is not quite updated. I didn't finish this report before we started our appeal process, so some of this information is still a little old. This came from the MLS, the Realtors listserv, as far as some data about Transylvania County. You can see from 2023 through to 2024, the median home sale, or the median sale price in Transylvania County was around $500,000. That's actually higher than our peer counties. Transylvania County has a higher per median sale price on a residential home, higher than Buncombe and Henderson County. And you can kind of see on that chart just where the sales have trended to over the years. Going back to 2020 and 21, we really saw the sales start to take off and the market really increased for our area. Things have kind of leveled off going into 2023 and on into 2024, but what we haven't seen are home values start to come down. We kind of hit a spike in 22 and 23, and things have just kind of leveled off at that point, and we seem to be kind of holding steady as of right now. This is what I was referencing, so this is just looking at some of the median home sale prices. I don't know why I don't have the 24 data on here, but you can see Buncombe County in 2023 was at $467, median home sale price. Henderson County was at $434, and Transylvania County was at $462. So in 23, Buncombe was a little bit higher than us, but just to show, we were right there on par with Henderson and Buncombe County when it comes to home sale prices. This is just sort of a look at the sales, the actual volume of sales going back to 2021. So you can see going back to 21, moving forward to today, the actual volume of sales and total sales are continuing to decrease. What you saw in 21 was the crazy COVID market. Things went kind of nuts. 22 kind of continued that trend, but as we've gotten on into 23, 24, you're just not seeing as many properties sell or be placed on the market as what you did a few years ago. Vacant land kind of followed suit with what improved parcels were doing. This chart was meant to represent where the sales are coming in at versus the county's assessment. So if you go back to 2021, the average sale price in our county was about $463 for a home. You can see our assessment ratio was up around 80-some%. So in 21, was another reappraisal year for the county. The goal is to try and be at 100% of market value, which just means that we want to value your home and your property for what it would actually sell for on the market as of that given date. So as of January 1, 2025, we have reset those property values to hopefully reflect what your property would be worth on the market. But you can see that orange line continue to decline as we move through the years. And that just means our assessment ratios just continue to be lower and lower versus where the sales were coming in at. The sales in 22 were around 535 on average, 23, 576. You get to 24 and you're talking $640,000, which is really an incredible increase over the last couple of years. Commercial real estate, sort of a similar trend, except in the last couple of years, the sale prices did drop off. You can see our assessed values continue to get worse on commercial real estate as we went through the years. And same thing with land values. Our assessments just got, worse and worse as we went from 21 to 24 based on where the sales of property were coming in at. And as far as my visual aids go, that's really all I had for you folks. I know I've got to be pushing that 10-minute mark. I'll wrap things up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Owen. We're going to open this up for council's questions, and we'll start with Mr. Baker.
Oh, boy. Probably shouldn't have started with me, but that's okay. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I've been on the record here before that I really want to thank you for being here to present to us. But I think this issue probably warrants a longer-term effort on the city's part to try to understand how the county is doing these reappraisals. I think we were equally shocked when we started to look at the budget and see where our tax rate should be set, because particularly with the difference between residential and commercial properties, even if we had raised taxes 8 cents, there were certain commercial properties, some of the biggest in our county, like the hospital property and Ingalls, that would have seen a tax decrease. And they're going to get tens of thousands of dollars off of their tax bill next year. Just want to make that clear to everybody here. That's HCA, their revenues are $70 billion a year. Ingalls is a $7 billion revenue company. Ingalls has also participated in some anti-competitive practices of buying up properties that some of their competitors might move into and leaving them vacant. And those people are getting a tax break, while we're asking other people to pay more, which we have very little control of up here because the values are set elsewhere. So that is, I think, going to be the crux of my questions for you, Mr. Owen, is just that the commercial property values, it's clear from some of the charts that you showed that we haven't seen a lot of commercial properties change hands over the last few years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those commercial property values are stagnant or even going down, certainly not going down. So how do you adjust for that reality that the commercial properties aren't changing hands, but their values are most definitely going up, just like everybody else's single-family homes or their residences?
Yeah, so obviously the sales are what dictate our valuations and our assessments. So we look at commercial sales, just the same way that we do it as residential sales. And so honestly, in Transylvania County, we had good sales of commercial properties in almost about every category that you would hope to have a commercial sale in. The Food Line Shopping Center sold, so we got a grocery store sale there with a shopping center with it. The shopping center or strip mall that has the Starbucks and the Jersey Mike's in it, it sold. So that gives us a good commercial sale for that sort of retail space. We had some fast food chain property sales. So that all those types of sales and those different niches kind of help us reset those property values. So I know you mentioned Ingalls. Ingalls and Lowe's and some of your big commercial properties, they appeal their property assessments every time we have a reappraisal. I'm still waiting to get the file on the commercial properties. I would be shocked if Ingalls and Lowe's and those folks wouldn't be on that list of commercial property appeals. When we looked at how we were assessing our Ingalls and our Lowe's back in 2021 when they appealed, I looked at Henderson County, Buncombe County. I wanted to see what were other counties assessing similar type store. We had the highest assessed Lowe's in Western North Carolina. And when the Lowe's representative came to appeal their property value, he basically said, I'm going to make you look like fools at the property tax commission because your Lowe's is, in Brevard is valued higher than anything in Western North Carolina. Well, we just showed them commercial sales that we had from Transylvania County, and we never even made it to Raleigh. They dropped their appeal before we ever even had to defend it. Ingalls, similar story. Our Ingles on a per square foot basis, probably the highest in Western North Carolina, or one of the highest valued properties in Western North Carolina. I know you mentioned HCA in the hospital. That's a totally different animal. You know, that hospital, when it became taxable, I know everybody over at my office, you know, we said this is going to be a nightmare, because how do we put an accurate assessment together on this hospital? HCA did supply us with a professional appraisal that they had done, but they had that done for all the properties that they bought in Western North Carolina, not just ours. We fought with them back and forth when the hospital value was set in 2021. We settled for a number that was a little less than where the county initially came in at and a little higher than where HCA wanted it. We didn't end up going to Raleigh to have to fight that one either. They ended up settling at a higher price than what they wanted. They came back the next year and said, knock $8 million off. They said, COVID has ruined our bottom line, knock $8 million off our assessment. And we said, no, not going to happen. So we do fight those commercial properties year in, year out. But we did have good sales this year to help us set those commercial values. And I think I looked at the numbers just right around Brevard. Home values increased somewhere around 98%. Commercial properties increased about 51%. So commercial properties did go up in value, just not at the same rate as residential properties did.
And how do you account those vacant properties that I mentioned? I mean, we have some pretty big ones in Brevard, so how does that factor into your assessments?
Which, as far as?
Does the current use of the property affect how you assess the value of that property? If there is no use currently, it's vacant, does that?
Right, so vacant land, if it's being used residentially, it will be valued at one rate based on where residential vacant land sales came in at. If its highest and best use would be to be used commercially, then we'll have a commercial code for the vacant land and be, you know, assessing it accordingly.
So even if it is a commercial property that is vacant, that doesn't factor into your assessment in terms of lowering that assessment because it's not currently in use?
Right, regardless of whether it has a structure on it or not, if it's vacant, residential vacant land is going to be valued separately from commercial vacant land. So you're going to have a higher land value on a vacant commercial property than you would a vacant residential lot or residential parcel.
But would you have a different value if it were in use versus if it was not in use, is my question.
Yes.
So like next door, the Ingalls is in use, and right next, you know, they own the Kmart, the old Kmart, that is not in use. So are those two tax assessments different?
They are.
So it's a lower tax assessment on
the Kmart structure,
yeah. So again, that feels like a big discrepancy there because then, you know, Ingalls is essentially being incentivized to leave that vacant to a certain degree because they're getting a lower tax bill because they're leaving it vacant. And oh, by the way, Publix can't move in there or somebody else can't move in there. And that burden, as we're all learning, you know, we have to set the tax rate the same for everyone. But that does shift the burden from somebody at a commercial property to maybe somebody at a residential level. So that is, you know, and again, this is my fourth year on council. This is my first reevaluation that I've been through. So I'm learning some of this along with everybody else. But I do think that it has been a big enough challenge for us throughout this budget process that we deserve, our citizens deserve a more thorough examination from us. And I think, you know, as a whole, the shift of the burden from commercial properties to residential properties is, you know, a massive challenge for us. We've been talking about the affordability of homes for, you know, 4 or 5 years. And then, you know, in one tax assessment, the tax burden is shifting to those residences and people are having a hard time paying for it. And it is causing displacement. So it's a big concern of mine. You know, and we love our downtown and the downtown businesses. I do have one. I think I'll make this my final question, but I want to make sure that we continue this and want to talk about how we can maybe create some city structure to continue the conversation. But the Heart of Brevard, I noticed, was the lowest increase. And I wondered, just in your personal opinion, why you think that was the the lowest increase that you saw from any of the districts?
There were not any sales in the heart of Brevard that would cause us to increase the property values more than what we did. So we did have some commercial sales in the heart. I want to say the best sale we had in the heart was around $735,000, and we were assessing that structure fairly close to that. So when we reset the commercial properties for the heart, we just looked at the sales, and those assessments, we're bound by statute to be fair and equitable. We can't take a commercial property and say, well, just because it's commercial, let's fudge it 10, 15%. We have to assess it for what its actual true worth is, what its market value is. So I think, an interesting thing to mention about the heart, the highest sale you had in the heart's a residential structure. It's a condo that George Lynn's built over here. It sold for $1.6 million, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. But we do have, some of the commercial property here in the heart is assessed at 1.5, 1.6, in that range. There wasn't a sale that would even touch that.
Yeah.
You got a couple of commercial properties on the market here in the heart, but they've been on the market for some of them over a year with no movement, no action. I think the highest valued one listed was around $2.3 million. It's the building that D.D. Bullwinkle's is in, I believe. But it really hasn't had any action.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to be clear that I don't think, certainly not suggesting there's any sort of conspiracy going on or that these things are happening on purpose, but I think the process in itself and how we're assessing these values is biased towards increasing the value of residential properties while commercial properties are slower to sell. Like that just makes sense. Do we sell more homes in a year or do we sell more commercial properties in a year? Of course more homes sell. So we have more data to bump those values up. And so I think we're, again, I think this is the beginning of a conversation that we should continue to have, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, Mr. Daniel?
Yeah, I do have one. We heard some folks from the Rosenwald community speak about their concerns about their property values. You're doing a basic tax assessment, your reevaluation based on sales, and those would be primarily the newer homes that are being built for that's creating the gentrification of that neighborhood. Historically, and I think this is pretty easily proven and verified, black-owned properties value less than properties owned by Caucasian folks. So what you have is an artificial skewing of the data, in my mind. In other words, you're basing your tax evaluation on properties that are not owned by people who live in that neighborhood traditionally, and whose property is, if they were to go to sell it, they're going to get less for it than traditionally they would. And so I guess really my question is there a room for appeal, for relief to these folks? Can they say, my property's not worth that much? You're basing it on on houses that sell. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think there is relief. Can you say that out loud?
Yes, absolutely. I would encourage anyone to appeal their property value if you feel that it is inaccurate. If you look at sales, or if you know of sales in your area and you see that we're not assessing your property fairly based on those sales, absolutely bring that to the tax office's attention. We use a lot of different statistical measures and methods to try and weed out outliers and to try and find errors and mistakes. But at the end of the day, in a mass appraisal process, it's going to be expected there will be errors in assessment. I know you're mentioning Rosenwald. So we do look at, we look at everything that sells. So if you got new houses being built in that area, and I know we do, they're obviously going to sell for higher than where an older home's going to sell. But typically we're going to have some sales on those older homes. So, our goal is to try and blend those sales together so that hopefully we're being fair to the high-end properties and to the low end as well.
Well, I think we may just need to have Pamela, I'm speaking to you, 'cause, Rosenwald Advisory Committee. I think this is a perfect example of something that we can work on
I agree.
with our community there. To make that information, because I think there's going to have to be some awareness made
Yeah.
that this is an option. And I think some guidance on how we approach this, because I think it, again, you know, I think the data's skewed in that neighborhood in particular. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrow?
I want to say thank you to your department. I did experience a revaluation with property and in 2021, and they did really well. And I got what I wanted out of a lot that was still overvalued, but at least I was heard and I walked away happy. But for folks like me, like you, grew up here, and I have a piece of property that the taxes are more than twice of what it was actually paid for in my family's lifetime. So, so we don't have the privilege of legacy homesteading like some states do. But the reality is, in my family, my daughters and grandchildren will not have the same privileges that I and my generation had, of two generations. So on property, particularly at Lake Toxaway. But that's just the facts. And so I very well understand what the gentrification is, and we're on record as being the highest county in the state for gentrification. If I understand, a Duke study 25 years ago said that. And so mainly because of the Lake Toxaway and Burlingame and Coniston or whatever. So, but anyway, thank you for what you're doing. And for those of us, we just have to buckle up, I guess. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Holder?
I too want to say thank you for coming and being here this afternoon. And like Aaron, I have several questions, and Aaron asked a couple. First, I want to just make this statement. It just feels like the residents of Rosenwald are being punished because of this gentrification, and it just feels so unfair. And I'm just wondering if there's a process that can be revisited. I know you mentioned that we can make appeals. What is the appeal process? What do we need to do to make appeals?
Absolutely. So that process opens up every year in the month of January.
Only January?
Well, no, so it opens up in January,
Okay,
but you can appeal informally to the tax office all the way up until our county board of equalization and review convene. So usually that county board convenes in the month of April. So you've got January, February, March to bring anything to the tax office that you would like to talk to us about. And you know, like I said, we'll make adjustments if we see our assessments are out of line. Once that county board convenes in April, all property tax appeals have to go before that board. It's a 5-person board. They're appointed by the county commissioners to hear property tax appeals. That process usually stays open for about 1 month, so usually till May. And then once that county board adjourns, that does end the appeal process for the year.
so residents will have to wait until January of
They can
20.
still appeal now if they wanted to. They just have to go before the board. Our board's in session right now, and they will adjourn on May 27th. So
Okay.
if you want to appeal your value for this year, just make sure you get an application from the tax office for the board, and we'll make sure it's heard.
So we need to do that now, if there is an appeal. How do you review the homes? I noticed that you mentioned knocking on doors. Do you reevaluate every home, or do you choose a sampling?
So the goal of our office is to get to every neighborhood, every property on a 6-year basis. So the oldest neighborhood that we would have been in should have been back in 2018 at this point, or 2019. So we're constantly reviewing neighborhoods in the county and reviewing homes. So hopefully that we've been in your neighborhood, at your house within the last 6 years is how that process works. It's just a physical review of the house, walk around, obviously ask questions if the homeowner's home. We like to catch people home just so we can ask questions about the interior. Because the better information we have, the more accurate, we can assess the home.
Okay, When was the last time you assessed or reevaluated?
2021 was the last reappraisal.
So 4 years ago?
Yes, ma'am.
And Aaron kind of talked about this, the commercial property being appraised at a less than residential. So my question is, if the building is empty, how is it appraised? And they end up getting less or earning property funds if the building is empty? Because I think I heard you say that when you reevaluate, it's based on the sales of the company. If the building is empty, there are no sales. So how does that work?
So like, I know we talked about Ingalls, and it's a good example because obviously the Kmart has been vacant for years.
Right.
So in 2021, we put our assessment out there. Ingalls came to us and said, you know, you're way too high. You know, we've got this huge unused retail space beside us that, you know, they call it the dark store or dark store box theory or whatnot, where they think, well, just because it's not being used, there's no value there. It's worth nothing. That's completely bogus. Obviously, the structure's there, they're just not using it. So we still have a value on that part of Ingalls, on the old Kmart part. It is at a lower rate than the improved Ingalls store, though. So they're still paying taxes on that. There's still value there. It's just we don't have it assessed as high as the store, the retail space that actually is in use.
So I'm trying to, and this is my, not to make this as an excuse, but this is going into my second year, so I really am trying to understand how the building that's empty is assessed as at a lower rate than residential.
Well, it's not necessarily assessed at a lower rate than residential. So, I mean, Ingalls and the Kmart and all that together, I want to say, top of my head, it's 11 point something million dollars. You know, so I mean, there's a big value there, for sure. It's just, we have more value on the functioning part of the Ingalls property than we do on the Kmart side of things. And all that is, you know, the Kmart side, I don't know if you've been in there, I don't know if anybody went down there and early voted. It's pretty rough. You know, it needs a lot of updates, a lot of upgrades on the Kmart side. So that's really, it's the condition that we're taking into consideration there, that it hasn't been maintained, kept up to par, is why it's getting valued slightly less than the part of the store that's actually functioning.
And it made sense after you explained to reevaluate in fewer than 8 years. Is there a way you can maybe at another time bring to us what it would look like if you waited 4 years or if you waited 8 years? What would those numbers look like in actuality, so that we can actually see what that looks like and what it might feel like if we waited 6 years maybe?
Yeah, so, I mean, a good way to show how that's going to look is when we get to 2029, because that's what the county has scheduled for the next reappraisal, you're going to see what happens with these property values. You know, like I mentioned, we went up over $4 billion in county tax base because of this reassessment. I can't believe that the market's going to continue to stay where it is. I would think, as the market usually does, there's ebbs and flows. It's probably going to come back down some by the time we do this again. The whole goal for trying to shorten that window is just so that when we send the taxpayer a notice and say, hey, here's what your property's worth, the more routine that we do these reassessments, hopefully they'll get that notice and say, yeah, I believe that's about what it's worth. Because even waiting in this 4-year period, as crazy as the market took off in 21 and 22, you know, that causes a big sticker shock when, you know, when we hand out an assessment and say your property value doubled. So the goal to doing it every year would be that you would just see less sticker shock from one year to the next, and that the actual values would follow along each year for what they're truly worth. Because if the market does take a downturn, say next year, you know, these property values get locked in. You know, so we can't make an adjustment again until 2029. So if the market were to really dip off in the next 4 years, these valuations will stay the same until we get to that next reappraisal period.
So is your goal to get to appraisals every year? Is that what I'm hearing?
That would be the most accurate way to reset property values, because North Carolina says true market state, true value state. They want us to assess the property for what its true value is, its market value. That's not something that's been discussed, I know, with the county or with my office. I know there are some counties throughout the state that are, I think, looking to shorten to a 3, maybe even a 2-year window. I don't think there is a county in the whole state that's every year. It's a big process, a lot of work goes into it. We spend about 18 to 24 months putting all the data and information together to reset these property values and to do one of these reassessments. So it would just require more staff, more resources to do it more frequently.
Okay. And one of the residents asked why the county's taxes are higher than the city. Can you explain that so that our residents can understand?
So, each municipality sets their own tax rate. The county takes their budget, they take whatever the projected tax base is, and then their tax rate is based on that county budget. Obviously, the city has a completely different operating budget than the county. So you're going to see a difference there in those tax rates, just because you're going to have a difference in those budgets from what the county's looking to budget for versus what the city is budgeting for.
Okay. All right, that was it. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Wise?
Mr. Owen, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. When we first saw the revaluation numbers, I think it's fair to say we were shocked and dismayed, and I appreciate you have an enviable task of putting this together. I don't have a lot to add because I think most of my questions were answered by other council members, but I just would like to reinforce that between some of our less affluent neighborhoods and some of our most affluent, there was more than that 30% spread and increases. And I think, as Mr. Daniel said, I would love for the Rosenwald to look at that carefully. And I think as part of helping our community understand how they can appeal, if there's anything we can do or the county to do to be more proactive about getting that information out, helping people understand, because it's obviously a very complicated subject. It's hard to get your head around, and if we can get information to the public to help them understand what the timelines are, when they need to act, that they can act. I think a lot of people here didn't even realize they had that option. And you see something come from the county or in city, it's like, well, that's just a fact, and it's not. So I would love to really think about how we get our public, give them agency. They have that right. And so that's not a question, and it's not really directed towards you per se, but just as part of this process, because being a 4-year cycle, it's easy to forget what happens, and then bam, it's in your face. So, and that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Owen. We appreciate it. And I think at this point, folks, we will take a 10-minute break, and then we'll resume and go into the presentation on the budget. Okay. Everybody back. All right, well, we're just going to go ahead and start. He'll be back. All right, we're going to move on to our next special presentation, and that is the city manager is going to present the recommended budget for FY 2026.
Yes, ma'am, I am. Can everyone hear me if I stand right here? I know Harvey. My buddy Harvey, who cited my information. By the way, Harvey, I appreciate you doing that. I'm going to go over it again here in a minute. Before we start, council, I want to thank you all for your engagement throughout this process. These budgets are much harder to put together without an engaged board, and so I appreciate that. I also want to thank a few staff members before we start. All of our department heads have been involved in the creation of this budget, and so I thank them, but I want to send particular thanks to Dean, Selena, Kelly, Becky, and David. Along with me, they've been the core team in putting this proposal together. I also want to beg your forgiveness here before I start because I'm about to talk for a long time. I'm glad everyone went to the bathroom because I'm going to try to share enough detail that you all feel comfortable making a decision, and that'll take a while. But also, this is just a very important conversation, and it needs to take the time that it takes. This is not only a reflection of our spending priorities, but also of our sort of cultural priorities and the things that you value with money, resources, and with time and other resources as well. So it's going to take a little while. Hard copies of the recommended budget are in front of you. That document has also been published online, and we've advertised that link. My presentation today isn't going to go through that document page by page. It's just going to summarize its contents and go over some of the highlights of that booklet. I encourage anyone who's interested in more detail to go online and read through it. All right, this next slide is just a table of contents of what my presentation is going to include. I won't dwell on it. I encourage anyone who's interested in the finer points of municipal budgeting overall to go online and read this statute, North Carolina General Statute 159, better known as the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. Pictured on the screen is the first page, but this statute is dozens and dozens of pages of rules and restrictions on municipal finance. These constitute the guardrails that our parent government, the state of North Carolina, has put in place for our financial matters. The Act contains some transparency requirements, like a public hearing, but we here at the City of Brevard feel like it's important to go above and beyond that. So we've followed some extra transparency steps. The first is that document I just referred to in front of you. Very little of the information in that notebook is required by the state. In fact, we could probably meet the state's requirement in about 7 or 8 pages, but that booklet is 100 and some pages because we've voluntarily included information in there to help you make better decisions, but also for the general public to know what we're up to. And then the bullet points on this slide list some of the other transparency measures that we voluntarily put in place. Putting a budget together is hard work. You and the general public may have felt that staff and I have been harder to get in touch with over the last few weeks. If so, it's because we've been up to our eyeballs putting this budget together. But the process actually started way back in December. So on the left side of this slide are some of the milestones of the budget process. And then on the right side, although it's a little hard to see, I'm sorry, that text is so small, is the budget calendar that staff have been using over the past 5 or so months. And you can see all the important milestones that it lists. Council, you're not even brought into the budgetary process until about the 7th milestone from the previous page. And that's your priority setting retreat that you hold in either late February or early March, this year in early March. Although it's the 7th milestone, it's perhaps the most important, because without the guidance that we get from you during that session, we don't know how or where we should focus the city's resources. So on the right side of this page are the 6 themes you shared at the March retreat and that you affirmed at the April 7th council meeting and then again at the April 11th workshop. And although it's not on here, I want to share a memorable quote from one of those engagements from Councilman Morrow, who said, "Housing, trail development, and downtown master plan were sacrosanct priorities for the city." And I saw a lot of nods of agreement when he said that. So we also use other documents like the comprehensive land use plan to direct our resource allocations. Even though the club is mainly about land use stuff, there's council-approved guidance in there on other themes as well. And so if we're uncertain, we look to that document and others to see whether it's a priority of yours. All right. This slide is perhaps the one that most folks have been waiting on. This shows the new overall value of the city of Brevard's tax base and our calculated revenue neutral rate. As a note, this number is a little bit different than the one Mr. Owen showed us previously because that was just property and improvements, which means buildings, structures on property. This number includes all that plus taxable personal property and automobiles. And so if you add those things to the property figure, you get 1.99 million rather than 1.88, billion that he said. This table also includes the new tax base for the Heart of Brevard and the projected revenue neutral rate for them. As a spoiler, we are not recommending any changes to that rate. We are recommending adopting the revenue neutral rate for Heart of Brevard. And just as a reminder, and I'm going to say this several more times throughout my presentation, and Harvey helped us with this too. The revenue neutral rate is meant to describe a rate that brings in the same amount of revenue to us, the city. It does not denote a rate that keeps everyone's property tax bill the same. Okay, now we'll get into the meat and potatoes of my presentation. The things listed on this screen are, in my opinion, the most notable themes of this budget I'm about to propose. It maintains service levels in all departments. No cuts or no step backwards on any city service in this budget. It focuses resources on providing fair compensation and benefit for our employees, even during a time of austerity. It does this by increasing employee compensation across the board 3.5%. However, and there's one caveat, we are going to ask employees to contribute a little bit more to the cost of their health insurance. Right now, we subsidize that cost over 90%, and that's just not a sustainable subsidy. And so we're going to ask employees to contribute a little bit more to that, the equivalent of about $20 per pay period for employees with dependent coverage. The proposed budget also socks away money for future water and sewer capital expenses, and it continues contributions to your highest named priorities, the Housing Trust Fund, the Multi-Use Path Fund, and the Downtown Master Plan Fund. In the upper left of this slide is some basic information about the overall budget, which will total $27,663,815 across all funds. And on the right side of the page is some information about the various funds we maintain and how much each of them gets from that $27 million. Going back over to the left side, below the total $27 million figure, you'll see our big four funds. So these funds constitute the vast majority of our budget: General Fund, Fire Fund, Water Sewer Fund, and Stormwater Fund. How is the budget funded, that $27 million? I ask you to draw your attention to the bottom left, which is what my next few remarks are going to focus on. Our big three revenue sources, property tax, sales tax, and interest income, have for all intents and purposes stayed flat. Property tax has eked up just a little bit, even before we consider our tax rate, but sales tax and interest income are down slightly. The projected revenue that we get from our revenue sources is not enough to cancel out the increased expenses we're expecting this year. Things like the cost of employee health insurance, things like the cost of materials, utility costs to keep the streetlights on, consumables like gas and other things that we use to provide our services. The increases we expect in those areas far exceed our natural growth in revenue. So what I mean by that is, to maintain our services, we need more revenue. I shared this fact with you at the beginning of the budget workshop, and I could tell that it hung heavy over your heads. And we spent most of the day on the budget workshop negotiating what kind of revenue increase would be acceptable to you all. At the end of that session, you took a straw vote saying that you were okay with an up to 3-cent increase, but that you were hoping for 2.5. Well, as you've probably deduced by now, we've landed squarely in the middle. 2.75-cent proposed tax increase and our regular 4% increase on the per 1,000 gallon utility rate. The change in tax will affect every property differently, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But before I do, I want to answer a question that's come up to me today, and that is, how does a flat budget increase 6.1%? And the answer is, because that figure is a little bit misleading. It incorporates all the revenue and expenses in the budget, no matter their source. So it's not just the variable revenues like property tax and sales tax and things. It's also the one-time revenues, like, for example, the $285,000 from fund balance that you all have indicated that you'll appropriate for our contract with the county for supplemental police coverage. It also includes the proceeds from loans that we're about to take out to fund vehicles and other capital items. So I'll give you a specific example. In the water fund, we've budgeted $575,000 for a new vac truck. We're going to take out a 4-year loan to pay for it. The entire value of that loan, $575,000 around, is going to show up as a revenue in the FY26 budget. It's also going to show up as an expense, thus inflating both the revenue and the expense lines. But the net expense, in other words, the cost that we have to make sure we collect adequate revenue for, is only $130,000 for FY26. So that line inflates the budget by $430,000. The general fund is home to what people consider to be traditional government services: police, public works, planning, recreation, administration, and finance. Fire is, in most municipalities, a general fund service, but it's different for us for reasons I'll explain here shortly. This slide breaks down what we spend in each category on the left and what we budget for each department. Again, apologies for the small text on the right. But this is a page in the booklet if you want to follow along. I want to point out that the vast majority of this budget, nearly $10 million, is dedicated to public safety and public works services. These are the services that, in my experience, even the critics of municipal government think are essential. And nearly 2/3 of our general fund budget is applied to those services. I also want to point out that the general government line includes the cost of providing administrative services to our enterprise funds. So in a way, the taxpayers of Brevard who pay their property taxes that underwrite the general fund are subsidizing the ratepayers of Brevard's utilities. Now, we all know that in most cases, that's the same people, but not in every case. There are a few ratepayers for Brevard utilities that don't pay Brevard property taxes, and they're getting a nice little deal because the general fund is underwriting their fund. Moving on to the fire fund. As you know, Brevard Fire is jointly funded between the city of Brevard and Transylvania County at a rate of approximately 55% from us and 45% from them. And thus, it must be maintained in a discrete fund so that the county dollars don't bleed into other areas that are exclusively the responsibility of the city. This is a somewhat unusual arrangement, as municipal fire services, as I said, typically fall into the general fund. But as I just mentioned, there's no fire department in Brevard's general fund. The taxpayers of Brevard fund their fire department via an unremarkable transfer in the non-departmental section of the general fund budget. So if you're an interested constituent looking for the general fund's fire contribution, you're going to have to sort of look at the fine print to find it. But it's about $900,000 in operating expenses and $650,000 or so in capital expenses for the year to come. Last year, the council gave direction to try to approach the county and discuss the funding model. So we did, kind of, but we didn't take it too far for a couple of reasons. First, the deal is actually pretty reasonable. They help us out with funding, and we help them out by covering a large enough area that they don't need to stand up an additional department. That is our value to them. It's true that less than 45% of our calls are to the area we cover on their behalf, Sylvan Valley 2, and they give us 45% of our budget. That's true. But if it weren't for us, if we weren't covering Sylvan Valley 2, they'd spend a lot more than that 45% to provide services to that area another. So it's actually a pretty good bargain for both of us. The second reason is that the funding model at the county is up in the air. Right now, each rural fire department's funding comes only from the fire tax revenue that's raised in that fire district. As you saw from Mr. Owen's presentation a moment ago, some fire districts are richer than others. So there are haves and have-nots amongst the fire districts in our county. If a poor fire district has extra needs, the county must subsidize them via its general fund. And so they are pondering, and I don't know where the proposal stands at the moment. I know it's been discussed, but I don't think it's been decided, switching to a single countywide fire taxing district. This means that money raised in Taxaway can be sent to North Transylvania, Little River, or perhaps Sylvan Valley too, if needed. If this goes through, it's my understanding that the allocations to each department would be made by a committee of county staff and elected officials, and they'd consider criteria like number of calls, specialty equipment and training needs, facility needs, and the like. They have criteria, but I don't think they have a codified formula. So I can't plug in our figures and tell you how we'd fare under the new system. All I know is that right now it's kind of up in the air. So that's why we didn't press them further. We do have to meet with them in a week or so to present our proposed budget to them and make sure they're okay with contributing the full 45% that we have on this paper. Their contribution, which is listed there, again, apologies, it's in small text, at around $709,000, includes their 45% operational contribution, but also their share of the new fire truck that we're going to order in the new fiscal year. And that's displayed on there as the $850,000 capital expense. Not pictured in this slide, but a fire-related budget item I want to share with you is our need to make a decision soon on whether to move forward with the purchase of our next piece of fire apparatus. You may not know this, but the fire truck market is really hot right now. Prices are escalating and lead times are lengthening. If we wait, we risk paying more and waiting longer. So in 2 weeks at our next meeting, I plan to bring you a presentation on the need for this new piece of apparatus and my proposed funding strategy. Fortunately, I think it's going to work out so that there'll be no net impact on the budget. And the reason why I think we can make this happen is because some of our debt for a previously purchased fire truck is going to retire in the next year. And so if we just continue to budget that amount as we've been doing for the last 4 years, for the next 4, we can pay off the debt that we'll need to take out to buy the new truck. Moving on to stormwater. FY25 was supposed to be the startup year for our stormwater program, and in a way it was, but we had to pivot in mid-year, and so what we accomplished was a little different than what we expected to accomplish. The best thing that happened to us in FY25 in this area was that we got a year's worth of data on how much revenue our program as organized would actually collect. Last year, we were just using estimates, but this year we have real-life data. So you'll see that our revenue projections have gone down a little bit, but that's because they are based, as I said, on real-life data. And as for not accomplishing precisely what we wanted to accomplish, which was updating our stormwater master plan, I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because if we'd done so, it would have been in the pre-Helene environment. And as you can imagine, a major hurricane sort of reveals all your warts with regard to stormwater. And so by waiting to conduct that plan in FY26, we'll be doing it in the post-Helene environment, and in my opinion, that'll make it more valid. Moving on. The Water and Sewer Fund, I will also call this the Utilities Fund. It is our only true self-sustaining enterprise fund, which means it is not funded with tax dollars at all, other than that subsidy I mentioned earlier. It's funded exclusively with the rates that are behind the charges that we charge to folks. Like last year, I'm recommending that we intentionally over budget this fund so that we can continue to sock away money, in this case around $151,000 for future projects. We're about to enter a new financial era for municipalities. The ARPA funds that we've been using to maintain our capital program over the last few years are drying up. Our $13 million gift from the state, we've committed some to our pump station improvement project, and we intend to send the rest to our wastewater treatment plant improvement project. And the cost of the things that we need to keep our utility going are only going to go up. So therefore, in order to over budget and make sure we have a financial cushion to absorb some of those new expenses that we expect in the years to come, I'm proposing that we continue with our regular 4% increases to the consumption rate. Note that this increase only applies to the consumption fee. The fixed fee, which Mr. Locks brought up earlier, and Rodney, he's not here anymore. Rodney, you still here? There he is. It's actually $27 a month and not $55, but your point is taken. I'm recommending that we keep that flat. I want to note that even with a 4% increase to our rates, our projected collections from sewer are decreasing. And this is because one of our big sewer customers has made some significant conservation improvements on their property and is sending far less sewage into the system, which is good. But that means their bill is much smaller. Not so good. I wanted to show this slide merely to demonstrate just how much capital activity we have underway in the Water and Sewer Fund. So on the left-hand side, from about the 5th line down, each of those lines is a capital project that's either underway or recently completed that we're still paying off. And these figures don't even include the 2 capital projects you approved at our last meeting, the water treatment plant improvements and the pump station upgrades that together total about $10 million. Those aren't even on here. And so if you add those 2 projects to this list, you can see a pretty healthy capital program for our utilities. Again, apologies for the small text. This is on page 118 in the book if you want to follow along. This table gives information on the balances of our 7 big reserve funds. There used to be 6, but a few months ago, Dean and I extracted the roundabout-related expenses from the multi-use path fund and put them in their own. So now there's 7, and we have a more accurate and easier to understand picture of what's available for roundabouts and what's available for multi-use path before they were blended together. This table is important because this is where the money you budget for your sacrosanct priorities will go. After all, budgets aren't just for operating funds, but they're for strategic projects as well. Let me explain this table. The far left column is the name of the fund, and then in dashed font underneath, the various projects that are paid for via that fund. Second column from the left is the cash balance of each of those funds as of April 1. Middle column lists the commitments that we've made, the bold number at the top being the sum total of those commitments. The reason that it's in red is because you've got to deduct that total from the actual balance to know how much is available to spend. Fourth column, or second from right, is the money we expect to be added to these funds for the remainder of this fiscal year and, if you approve my proposal, at the start of FY26, which leaves the far right column as the available balance after that. And that's the number I think is most important for our purposes today, because that's how much money you'll have to spend on new projects or new uses in each of those areas. You can see that some of those far right numbers are in red. Two of them are close, and so we have a plan to get those back in the black. The only one of those that's significantly in the red is that way intentionally, and that's the Housing Trust Fund. And that's because at the last meeting you agreed in theory, and we'll verify this here with the next item on the agenda, to let the city borrow $925,000 to buy Azalea Avenue for properties for a future low to moderate income housing project. And so that 925 is reflected in that deficit. But I think you've committed to repaying that gradually over the next 5 years, and so we have a plan to get that back in the black. Oops, excuse me. So why is this chart important? Well, because it shows the sources of existing dollars that I propose we tap into to pay for some of your important projects without burdening the FY26 operating budget. We can afford to keep all the priorities going with FY26 dollars alone. We're going to have to tap into these reserve funds to keep the momentum on some of those projects. And the way I recommend obviously keeping that momentum is to tap into our piggy banks, which are expressed here. So what specifically do I recommend we do with our piggyback dollars? Well, two sets of things. Regarding how we spend multi-use path and downtown money, I recommend that we ask the relevant committees what their priorities are for the year, that being the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee and the Downtown Master Plan Committee. There are a couple of options for each. For example, on the trail, do we complete the real estate acquisition down here on Main Street that we started this year? Or do we pivot and focus on repairs to the bridge? Those kind of recommendations are the things that, in my opinion, the committees are built for, and so I recommend we ask them. As for the second set of things I recommend we reach into our piggy banks to pay for, I want you to draw your attention to the table here. This document, which I call a supplementary spending plan, takes money that we've still got in FY25 through savings or through some other source, and I suggest we apply it now to take some pressure off the FY26 budget. We had this last year. It might not look familiar to you because last year it was about 15 lines long. This year it's only 3, and that's a reflection of the austerity in our budget. But we do have a little bit of capacity, particularly in the water sewer fund, to purchase some things this year and take some of the pressure off next year's budget.
What page are you on?
This is on page 162, 163. And I'll ask you to approve this plan at our next meeting so that we can move on some of these expenses before you approve the larger budget, I hope, the week after that. All right, I'm getting there. Stay with me. So what will the impact of this 2.75 cent tax rate increase and 4% utility consumption increase be on the taxpayer and ratepayer? I want to share my appreciation with Ms. Bowers, if she's still here. She's still here? No. Okay. for the research that we did. She did. We did similar research and came to a similar conclusion. But before I go any further, I just want to, again, reiterate what I said before. Everybody's property tax situation is different. Everybody's property value was different before the revaluation. Everyone's change in value was different. And on a related note, everyone's utility bill will be different because it's based on their use. And I just want to point out, and I want to put this in bright lights on the marquee, the difference in tax bills that people see this year is mainly attributable to their new valuation and not to our tax rate. But with that said, I think it's important to go over a few different types of properties and understand what kind of burden each of those properties will experience in this new environment. So what you see here, council, you've seen before. It's been refined a little bit since we talked, but to the folks in the audience and the folks watching online, what we have here is the story of 3 different properties, and this is what Harvey was referring to. One of low value, one of medium value, and one of high value, and the cumulative impact on their wallet of their new value, their proposed new tax rate, and their utility usage. And these are residential properties. We'll go into commercial properties a little later. These are actual existing properties that I think are pretty representative of similar type properties throughout the city. I know exactly where these houses are. I can take you to them, but I'd rather not, to maintain the privacy of the folks that live there and own those houses, except for one, the middle one. Harvey, you didn't know this in your presentation, but that's my house.
Why isn't mine in there?
Because I don't-
Put it in there if you want.
I bet we can put it in there if you want.
Brand new.
That's right. As you've heard from Mr. Owen earlier, residential properties were indeed the category that saw the largest jump in values countywide. Properties that had a low value, like the first one here, had nowhere to go but up, essentially. And they did. We know that homes are a scarce commodity in this area, so their fair market value is going to reflect their scarcity. The top table on this page, as I said, shows a home of modest value, but we can see that its value nearly doubled. On the whole, I think having the value of your home increase is a positive thing, as it generates equity and thus net worth. I'm excited about my value going up because although I want to live in it for a long time, it's probably not the last house I'm ever going to own. And so I like the fact that I'll be able to sell my house for more. But I understand that rapid increases in value can be a big burden on folks, and that not everyone plans on selling their house. And so equity and increased value doesn't really mean much to them. I get that. But I just wanted to point out that there are pros and cons to values going up like they did. At the top of the table, that property's tax bill, as Harvey said, even if you adopt the revenue neutral rate, is going to be about $158 higher than last year. And with their utility fee increase, their overall annual burden will be about $165 higher. If we adopt the 35.75 cent tax rate, their property tax bill will be $210 higher. Again, I want to note that only $52 of that annual burden will be attributable to our tax increase. Again, the middle table is mine. My tax bill is going to go up from $468 at revenue neutral to $632 at the proposed rate. If my utility consumption stays the same, you all know that that's unlikely because I have 2 kids that like to take long showers, my utility fee will go up by about $25 a year. It's only for the high value homes, like the one reflected at the bottom of the page, where the story is different. Note that its appraised value only went up 30%. A far smaller increase percentage-wise than the other two, and below the overall increase in the city of Brevard of about 50%. Since this home's percentage increase is less than the overall percentage increase, a revenue-neutral rate will result in a tax decrease for this property. My proposed 35.75 cent rate will see this property's taxes go down by only $87. As has been made pretty clear already today, this phenomenon applies to commercial and industrial properties as well. Here on the screen, you see the overall burden to Ingalls, Belk, and Charlie's Tire. This table looks a little bit different because commercial properties pay slightly different fees than residential properties, and those are included here, although I'm not recommending we make changes to any of those rates. And this page is 178 if you're following along in your booklet. I'd like to point out that Charlie's Tire, in the case of Charlie's Tire, their tax bill will go down, but their utility bill will go up enough so that they'll still see a slightly overall higher bill to us in FY '26 if you adopt the 35.75 cent rate. More commercial properties. Aaron, Transylvania Regional Hospital there at the top. I know that it seems unfair on the surface that these high-value entities don't have to share in the additional tax burden like homes do, but I also think in fairness to them, it's important to point out that their tax bill is much, much higher. TRH, for example, will still pay nearly $80,000 in property taxes and nearly $140,000 in other fees to us in FY '26. Triangle stop there in the middle, down here at the intersection of Caldwell and Rosman Highway, they had a big increase in value. I don't know why their property increased so much. I'm not sure how it was calculated or why it jumped, but they're looking at a between $8,000 and $9,000 increase to their property tax bill next year. But that's attributable to their change in value and not to our increase in the tax rate. All right. I'll wrap up now by saying that, in my opinion, this budget preserves all services and maintains service levels, not a step back. It values employees by keeping them fairly compensated. It intentionally over-budgets our utilities so that we'll be prepared in the future to shoulder the cost of necessary capital improvements. And it'll do all this at a small additional burden to tax and ratepayers. So folks, I'm willing to take questions now, but I'd actually like to make a procedural suggestion. I know that some of your answers will require some research on our part to quantify, for example, if you're going to make a proposal to turn the dials a little bit. And so what I'm going to suggest is that you let me receive questions today, go back and work with staff to compile the answers, and then send those to you in a follow-up document. If you don't want to do that, I'll do my best to answer your questions now, but I think I'll be able to get you better answers if you let me follow up with those in the days to come. But that's all I have for my presentation for now.
All right, we will open it up for questions. We will go ahead and start with Councilman Wise.
Oh, boy, howdy. Thanks, Wilson. I know you love this stuff. Okay, so we have gone over this budget a couple times in our retreat, and I'm sure we've all looked over it, and I don't have a lot of tweaks per se, but I think there's some notable things to kind of call out. One, I appreciate, to revisit this, your explanation on the amount that HCA is paying. I think that's kind of like saying that, a wealthy person, even though they pay a lot, that kind of makes it fair. It doesn't. They need to pay their fair amount, in my opinion. So I'm kind of with a lot of people. I think we got to really look at that, because a tax break is not, that's a bad look. Okay, sorry. So the other thing is, in terms of the fire funding, it's probably a question, I know that one's up in the air. I'm really curious about the single district methodology and what the other fire district captains think of that proposal. I've read a little bit about it, but that one is kind of so far outside of my wheelhouse. I don't know if it's an advantage or disadvantage to the city, and that's the way I'm going to look at it. We do have a lot of earmarks that you mentioned about the number of calls we respond to, having a special equipment for a very challenging district, et cetera. So I'm really curious about that piece. And again, with this budget, I think, one, I appreciate the public comments we've gotten. I think when we look back at our priorities, one of the key was infrastructure improvement. This is a daunting task. We have a huge amount of infrastructure as a small city we need to take care of, and a lot of it has not undergone the kind of preventative work that it needed to in the past years, and I think the amount of money we're putting into that reflects our commitment. And I say that because it's not especially exciting to say, look, we have new wastewater pipes and sewer treatment pipes, but that does improve the quality of life for every person in this city. And while it's not as exciting as something else, I think those are so key and important to our life in general. So I appreciate the amount we're dedicating in this budget to make that happen. So, and that is all I have.
Ms. Holder?
Okay, page 97. I think there's correct me if I'm wrong in reading this, there's an increase in water tap and connection fees. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay, what is,
The only utility fee increase that I'm recommending is 4% on the consumption fee, so the number of gallons that you use.
okay. I guess I'm looking at the difference in the projected amount collected so far and what you're recommending for next year, but there's not an increase in that line. You see what I'm saying?
Page 97.
Page 97.
We're actually projecting that we'll collect less in both of those areas because of, as Mr. Owen showed on his slide, less development activity. Usually those fees are paid by folks building new buildings, and since there's less activity in those areas recently, we're projecting to collect about $40,000 less of those fees in the
Okay.
year to come.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line. It should be the high-strength waste.
Yep. High-strength waste has actually been tracking pretty accurately with what we projected last year. It brings in about $150,000 extra dollars per year, and as we intended, that helps us pay the additional cost of chemicals and other tools needed to treat that high-strength waste.
Okay, now it's coming back to me.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about the high-strength waste
Thank
is that, you remember last year, we were concerned that it might jack some people's utility bills up 1,000%. Well, that hasn't happened. Everyone who has had a big increase and chosen to opt down has been able to fall down a couple tiers. And so the increase has been manageable for those folks, and the opt-down procedure seems to be working as intended.
Okay. And the other question, and I would preface this by saying this is hard to talk about with employees here, so I don't want anyone to take it personally. In our budget meeting, we talked about 3.5% increase for those who are not in, who are not directors or in management, and 2.8 for those who are in management or directors. And then this offers a 3.5% increase for everyone based on COLA. the national average for COLA is 2.5% this year, and next year they anticipate it would be 2.3%. So I'm just wondering if we could meet in a happy medium for everybody to have the same amount of increase, maybe 2.75% or 3% for everyone, rather than upper management getting a lower increase than non-managers, but everyone get the same increase.
We'll calculate that, yes, ma'am.
And see how that can help us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrow?
I'd just like to add my personal appreciation too. As you mentioned, you acknowledge your team. It's extremely well put together, and I thought reflects what we as a council have talked about and prioritized. And we're going to continue to get people who are not going to vote in the city to not really understand some of why we do what we do. We heard some of that tonight, but we do need to have a budget that we can defend, and in my sense, I think I can do that. So thank you.
Mr. Daniel?
Well, I'll echo that, Mr. Morrow. I agree. I feel like one of the things, the strengths of this budget to me is that our regard for our employees, our staff. We've been working over the last few years to pull that back to where it needs to be. I think this budget does that, or continues to do that. And I find that satisfying. So. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
Sure. I do want to just mention that I think this is really well done and transparent and pretty clear. I always appreciate, Wilson, the first few pages of the recommended budget that just lays out sort of the narrative as you see it. And I think it's pretty clear for the public where the priorities lie, what the challenges were for the budget. And so if you don't want to dive into all 200 pages of the budget, at least read those first few pages that I think give a very clear sort of outline of how Wilson sees the budget and, representing all of the city staff as well. So thank you for that.
Sir.
I want to go back to what Councilwoman Holder asked about with the COLA increase. And I remember it the same in that coming out of the budget meeting, I believe our recommendation was for sort of the to keep pace with the living wage in Brevard, that some employees would receive a 3.5% increase to maintain that living wage, but then all other employees would see a 2.8% increase. And so I'm not sure where that changed in the process, but I would also, I know you've said you'd calculate how that would change the budget, but I would also like to see that. And I want to make a clarifying point. I think you mentioned in the beginning sort of a shift in the burden to employees in the health insurance area. And I just want to be clear that is just for employees who have dependent coverage on their plan, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, if it's just a single employee on the plan, we're still paying 100% of that health insurance coverage.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I know this is tough, but one thing I think that was missing from some of our discussion was just a comparison with some similar municipalities around us in terms of the tax rate. And, we're all, I think it's very obvious, learning a lot about tax reassessment. And it can be extremely challenging to compare yourself to a neighboring municipality because they may not have had a reassessment for the last 4 or 5, even 6 years. And so your tax rate might seem incredibly low because they haven't, had the benefit, or maybe not the benefit, of an assessment happening. So I would like to just throw that out there to the staff and ask whether we can find a way to find some comps, I guess, in our, similar size municipality and having undergone a recent reevaluation. Because I think that would help us just put us into, a category that we can compare where we sit.
Yes, sir, we can do that, and we'll pull comps, whether they've had a recent reevaluation or not, and then just note, when the last time each of those cities had a reevaluation was.
Thank you. And then the high-strength waste fee, I noticed there was that, did that not kick in until a few months into the fiscal year?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So we started at about start of second quarter?
Well, yeah, we just started at like the tier 5 or whatever for the first month, and then it was tier 4 and 5 for the next month. So not only did we start a couple months into the year, but we've only had all the tiers for the last like 4 months.
And do we have can you tell me how many people have sort of challenged where they sat in the tier list? And
I don't have that exact, we could get that for you.
okay.
Maybe
3?
I know of 2 that I've had to deal with specifically.
Okay.
But I know more have talked about it.
Yeah.
But it's 5 at the most.
Okay.
But 2 that one that talked about it, the other that I'm working on a solution for them opt that.
Right. Okay. And do we know, has any of that inspired people to invest in pretreatment?
That is a conversation I'm having with one.
Okay.
Not pre-treatment specifically, more Oregon.
Right.
Intercept.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested just to learn more about, I know I'm not on the Public Works Committee, but maybe y'all are talking about that. But I'd be interested to learn just how that rollout has gone and, some of those interesting things. And just a couple more things. And again, I'm sort of stepping on probably some of my fellow council members' toes here on some other committees. But I do, think from what I know, some of the funds that we have, the separate funds, the multi-use path fund, the downtown master plan fund, the housing fund, I personally have a very clear idea of how, the various projects that the multi-use path fund might be used for and the housing fund might be used for. And I know we've had some conversations around the downtown master plan. I think we all have reiterated our support for that plan. But I would like to understand where the priority projects are for the plan and what might be that next big project that those dollars might be spent on. Because I'm not unaware of that, and I'd like to learn more about that.
Sir.
And then the fire fund. I do want to ask, one thing I do appreciate about our city manager, and maybe this is because he's a preacher's kid like me, but we might differ a little bit here, is that Wilson usually, I think, sees the best in people and expects them to act in everyone's best interest. But I do worry that about the worst that could happen with the county agreement. I don't want to expect the worst, but I do want us to be prepared for that eventuality. And, with their changing in the fire fund model, I do think that challenge is out there. And I don't want us to be caught unaware of that. So I would challenge the staff just to think through the different scenarios that might happen depending on how the county decides on their budget and the funding of Sylvan Valley 2, and what our response might be for those different scenarios. It is a little concerning because I was on the Public Safety Committee. We did hear from the county about their plans for the fire fund, and we did ask them, when they were asking us to opt in to the countywide fire tax, well, how are you going to decide how those funds are distributed if you go to a single district model rather than the individual districts? And their answer was pretty much, well, we're going to do it on vibes, and we're going to look at some data, but in the end, we just kind of sit around and decide where that money goes. And personally, that's a little scary to me, and should be scary to our residents who rely on that fire department. And so I want us to be able to focus on that area and communicate with the county the importance of that funding and the response from the fire department. And so I think there's a lot more work to do on that, and would like us to game out sort of the scenarios, even if we're not hearing from the county right now what their plans are.
Yes, sir.
And then just finally, I want to reiterate what I think Councilman Wise said about some of the capital improvements that are represented in this budget in the utility funds. A lot of those improvements are invisible, and I don't think you're passing by a pump station every day and thinking like, wow, look at that brand new generator that pump station has. I'm so glad that City Council has funded that. But I can guarantee you that economic development is downstream of all those utility improvements. Affordable housing is sometimes downstream of all those utility improvements. So it really is the foundation of what the city is going to accomplish over the next couple decades. And so I think it's hard sometimes. In today's society, we like the big shiny object, but those underground improvements and things as regular as a pump station can be exciting. So I'm glad we're focused on that, and we have the plan to pay for them, and look forward to seeing that roll out, and we'll get around to some shiny object projects too, and I look forward to that day too. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, council, at this point, I need a motion to set May 19th as the required public hearing date. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. May 19th will be the statutorily required public hearing on this budget. All right, moving on to our first public hearing. Our public hearing is on the ordinance, the voluntary non-contiguous annexation, John Valenti and MTS Properties, 4 parcels on Reservoir Road and Hampton Road.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have, as you said, an application from Mr. Valenti for a voluntary non-contiguous annexation of 4 properties that are located between Reservoir Road and Hampton Road, currently within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. They are in close proximity to existing corporate limits and therefore in close proximity to all city services that we currently provide in that area. So any sort of service delivery impacts are estimated to be very minimal. Because it's non-contiguous, we had to verify that it is eligible for annexation under the statutes, and it is. These are residential properties in a residential area, and so like I said, there's not a whole lot anticipated to be challenging when it comes to providing full city services to these parcels. The applicant is here if you have any questions for him. And the planning board discussed this at their March 25th meeting and unanimously recommended approval. And that's really all I have on this.
All right. Council, I need a motion to officially open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is open. There is no one that signed up to speak on the public hearing. Therefore, council, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will now open it up for discussion or questions by council. I will start with Mr. Morrow.
I think it's wonderful to have this area of the city to get developed. So congratulations and best wishes.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think that, I always thought that there's a lot of potential.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
appreciate the opportunity.
right, yeah. Well, good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Mr. Daniel.
I have no comment.
Ms. Holder.
I don't have any comments or questions, but thank you.
Mr. Baker.
Just one question, mostly out of curiosity. Does this, how does this change road maintenance in that area?
It doesn't.
Okay, so that's, it's just a state road, so it stays a state road? Okay.
I was hopeful that it would change.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have an excavator now.
I hear you I hear you there. Yeah, I'm excited about this, so thank you. Yep.
Mr. Wise.
No comment, but also this is good news. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, and the public hearing has been held and closed, and we will move on to our next public hearing. But you didn't need anything else on that today, did you, Aaron?
No.
No, okay.
No, but the next public hearing is a concurrent rezoning request by Mr. Valenti for these same four parcels. They're currently zoned general residential 4, and the request would be to rezone them to general residential 8. And so the only difference, there's two differences between GR4 and GR8. The first is the maximum allowed density of residential development, 4 units per acre in GR4, 8 units an acre in GR8. The other difference is just the maximum ground floor area for principal structures would go down from 10,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. That's the only difference in GR4 and GR8. Typically, residential areas within the city limits are GR8, and so it's sort of a consistent practice to rezone residential properties when they are annexed. The comprehensive land use plan, future land use map, identifies this area as a traditional neighborhood character area, and GR8 is an applicable zoning district for that character area, so the proposed rezoning is consistent with the future land use map of the comprehensive land use plan. Planning board also discussed this at their March 25th meeting and unanimously recommended approval, and in accordance with state law, they have also submitted to you their statement of consistency and reasonableness.
All right, council, I need a motion to officially open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is now officially open. Nobody has signed up to speak at the public hearing. Council, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is closed. We will open it up for any comments or questions by council. Mr. Wise.
My thoughts have not changed on this issue.
Ms. Holder.
Ditto.
Mr. Morrow.
Support the planning board.
Mr. Daniel.
No comment.
Mr. Baker.
I'm good.
Okay. Moving on. Our third public hearing. All right. And this is the proposed installment financing contract with United Community Bank to purchase the Azalea Avenue property.
Yes, ma'am. This is just a procedural step that we're required to take. I reviewed the substance of the request at our last meeting, but just for the benefit of those who might not have heard it, this is to accept a loan proposal from United Community Bank for $925,000 at 4.33% interest over 59 months. And the yearly principal and interest payments will be about $209,000 per year. And at the end of 5 years, we'll have paid it off and be able to do what we need to do with that property. And that timeline actually corresponds pretty well with about how long it will take to develop that property with a LIHTC-funded project.
Council, I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is now open. No one has signed up to speak at the public hearing. Council, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is now closed. Council, I believe on this one that you need to take action. Staff is asking you to pass the resolution affirming your April 21st acceptance of the loan and instructing staff to execute the purchase of the Azalea Avenue properties. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll now open it for discussion. Mr. Wise?
It's a fantastic step for some desperately needed housing in our community.
Ms. Holder?
I agree. Can they start building the day after? I'm excited.
Mr. Morrow?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for this neighborhood.
Mr. Daniel?
It's been a long time coming on this piece of property. I know it's been considered for some time by the Housing Committee, and I'm excited to see it taking place.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, it's a great step forward. I think we've all been trained these days to react to sort of notifications on our phone, you know, and we wait for those like breaking news things to see things change. And in reality, things move a lot slower than that. And there's big steps like this that probably aren't going to get a lot of headlines, but I'm really glad that we are here, and it's the right thing to do. I think it's the culmination of really 4.5, 5 years' work from the city, and you know, there's more to come, obviously, but it's a hugely important step. And I also want to note that this is connected to that entire neighborhood and the improvements that can be made there. There's a lot of help that those folks need. And I'm really hopeful that we can welcome the county's help on that project before this is all said and done. So look forward to more discussions very soon.
Council, we have a motion and second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we are moving on to the consent and information. Following items are on the consent agenda. 1, proclamation number 2025-15, Public Service Recognition Week. 2, resolution adopting Rotary Club Peace Polls as official government speech. 3, Council Housing Committee meeting minutes, January 14th of 2025. 4, Council Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee meeting minutes, February 19th, 2025. 5, Council Finance, Human Resources, and Citizen Appointment Committee meeting minutes, February 24th, 2025. 6, Council Public Safety Committee meeting minutes, February 24th, 2025. 7, Council Downtown Master Plan Committee meeting minutes, March 18th, 2025. 8, Council Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee meeting minutes, notes, March 19th, 2025. 9, correspondence, the ABC Board meeting minutes of March 27th, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to unfinished business. The first item is the proposed text amendment to the City of Brevard Unified Development Ordinance, Chapters 3 and 19, New Flea Market Retail Land Use. And Mr. Bland will be presenting.
Yes, so this is a follow-up to the public hearing you held in April. And this is a staff-initiated text amendment to clarify 2 definitions in the Unified Development Ordinance. One is for abandonment, which again is a critical definition that is not in the UDO currently, but the trigger point for compliance with non-conforming land uses hinges on being abandoned for 180 days. So it is important to codify what it means to be abandoned.
And then the new retail land use of a flea market is being introduced to try to capture more sort of outdoors or kind of open air retail uses that would currently fall into this sort of catch-all, all retail sales establishment category currently. During your public hearing, there was some discussion about the definition of the flea market, and so we have removed the word occasional. It used to say a periodic and occasional sales activity, so we removed occasional to try to hone down it a little bit to clarify the definition based on your discussion last month. One thing we did not talk about last month is where this would be allowed, and so I just want to bring your attention to the proposed line in the use matrix that would be added. Currently, in the planning board's recommendation is to only allow it via a special use permit in corridor mixed use. So I just want to make that clear and bring that to your attention if you would like to discuss that tonight. But again, you held the public hearing already, so tonight we are requesting a vote on these amendments.
All right, council, do I have a motion to approve the amendment as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we will open it for discussion. Mr. Morrow?
Thanks again for the staff for initiating this.
Ms. Holder?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Wise?
Thanks for the clarification on the flea market definition, which I know I was struggling with, and where we can have these amazing flea markets. Otherwise, no questions.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on my questions last time about the short-term rental issue and how the abandonment definition might interact with those existing rules.
The abandonment would, written with the word intentionally discontinue, there is the possibility that there will be periods of time of discontinuance which were unintentional. Remodeling, maintaining, restoring, otherwise improving. That would be, if somebody was fixing up their short-term rental, it would probably be approved. It would probably not be considered to be abandoned under the rules. What you posed the last time, which was somebody has it on the market, it just doesn't never rent out for 6 months. There is a possible argument that would not be intentional discontinuance for some reason or another. However, I will remind you that the burden is on the person who is using the property to prove that they, in fact, ever used it as a non-conforming use during that 180-day time period. And so therefore, I think, frankly, the chances of something like this happen are relatively minimal, and it still would not address one of the more prominent issues with short-term rentals, which was outside companies and corporations buying them up and buying up houses in neighborhoods and holding them for short-term rentals, because they wouldn't be buying the property, and their intent to take it off the market would be less. So I think I know that's a convoluted answer, because the answer truly is, yes, what you posed probably, if somebody got sick and wasn't able to rent it out for 6 months, and they could prove that they were doing it consistently beforehand, they would probably be allowed to maintain their use under the abandonment clause. But again, it's on them to prove that continued use.
Right. Just for fun, would you say that Ingalls has abandoned the use of the Kmart in the bylaw?
That is a very interesting question, considering we had a county official come here and suggest that it was unusable for any purpose, according to the tax map. And I assure you that I'm going to take a peek at that over the next week or two.
Thank you.
My answer as a zoning official is yes.
Thank you.
But retail's allowed there, so new retail use could start.
Right. Still.
It wasn't a non-conforming use.
Thank you for putting that into the minutes. And those are all my questions.
I think Mr. Daniel?
Yes, I was concerned about the flea market location, corridor mixed use, not neighborhood mixed use or residential mixed use would not be allowed, is that correct?
As written, that's correct.
That seems restricted to me. I think I know there's, well, I mean, this happens every Thursday, there's a flea market in my neighborhood that I guess would not be allowed. And I think it's quite has a very positive impact on our neighborhood. So I would like to see that changed. I would like it to change the allowance of where a flea market could be held. Are flea markets permitted?
They should be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that everyone is, but.
I'm not sure they are. But, I mean, seems to me that the permitting would take care of some of some issues that people may have with having them. But I would prefer that it not be as restricted as that.
So, Mr. Daniel, you are proposing a change specifically, because we have a motion and a second on the table.
Yeah.
So do you want to have that motion amended?
I would ask that it be amended. I'm not, so neighborhood mixed use, I think that's where, you know where I live, right?
Yeah.
We're a neighborhood mixed use, right?
I think it's a mix, but I think predominantly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would like to see it amended to allow any mixed use neighborhood or residential.
By right or with a special use permit?
Well, special use permit would be fine.
The planning board's thought process in the special use permit is there's a pretty broad spectrum of what these can look like. And the special use permit allows you to take each one on its own.
Yeah.
I would say that, yes. Special use permit. That would be my request.
Who made the motion? I forgot.
Mr. Morrow,
Yeah.
seconded by Mr. Wise.
I'm good.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so we now have an amended
I don't want to hurt anybody.
motion.
So that would be special use permit in all districts except institutional campus and general industrial? You said all mixed use and
In GR,
residential?
I think it was all mixed-use districts.
Yeah, not residential.
Not in residential, okay.
Residential mixed use.
Gotcha, yes, okay.
Okay, everyone's clear on the motion that is now on the table that we're going to vote on? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the amended motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, and that is the end of unfinished business, and we have no new business. And we are moving on to remarks and future considerations. And we will start with Ms. Holder.
I had my remarks ready about 2 hours ago. I just want to go back to this report that we got tonight, and it's something to seriously consider and think about, and not let it go unattended. And I know this is going on in many areas of the country, but as Brevardians, what are we going to do to make it right? And is that possible? Of course. I think if we can go to the moon, we can make things right. So looking forward to working with the community to do that. I'm also excited about the Azalea project and affordable housing. And Wilson, when we have a chance, I would like to know more about this flyer and the information.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Wise?
Yeah, first off, I kind of say this every time, but thanks to everyone who spoke to us publicly. That input is vital for us. we take it very seriously, and without it, we would be directionless. So thank you very much for that. We heard a lot of stuff today from a lot of talented people, far more talented than I am anyway, and so I thank them. But one of the things that we did learn, especially that you just brought up, was I think revaluation as a system is flawed, fatally flawed. It's not sustainable. I also realize that the Trans-Vandy County is not going to be the spearhead to change that. They don't have the power, but we can work to make it a better system, and we can give tools to our public to help them make sure they are taxed fairly and assessed fairly. And I think that's really something we can do and we should do. You know, unfortunately, we don't hold a lot of the tools to change our own fate, thanks to being a Dillon rule state, but we can do that. And then we've heard a lot, so I'm going to shut up. Thank you.
Mr. Morrow?
I have no comment, thank you.
Mr. Daniel?
I have no comment.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, just wanted to bring up Mills Avenue and the issue we're having over there with the culvert. I know we're studying that, but I'd like to get an update from staff on what our plans are and when the residents might expect that to be reopened.
David, would you mind coming up here so we can get your voice on YouTube?
Yes, sir. Glad to give you an update. So we had initially proposed a repair to the culvert. And in the Public Works Committee, and thanks to the assistance of Chairman Morrow, we learned that in the 2007 Stormwater Master Plan, it had identified that culvert as being undersized for a 100-year flood and in need of replacement and recommended replacement. So if we continued with a repair, we would fix the culvert, but we wouldn't fix the larger problem of the culvert being able to sustain a 100-year flood, which is what it was identified as being too small in the 2007 master plan. So the committee decided to move forward with a replacement of the culvert versus a repair, or to investigate the cost at least of a replacement versus a repair, and to see whether or not FEMA would help us fund the replacement. So a repair was in the neighborhood of around a couple of $100,000. A replacement of the culvert is probably more in the neighborhood of about $1.5 million. So we have been in discussions with FEMA about whether or not that cost could be covered, and it appears that it is very likely that it would be covered. So been working with the designer to have an initial proposal from them and working to get that proposal finalized to design a replacement. Once a part of that design fee will include a cost estimate. Once we have that cost estimate, FEMA will, if it's a certified cost estimate, they will accept it as the correct number. Currently, FEMA has identified the cost around $250,000, which is what they would reimburse us on a project that could be $1.5 million. So once we have a certified cost estimate, hopefully FEMA will raise their number. That's what they've indicated to us that they would do, and then we would move forward with replacement. So we're probably, very frankly, a couple of months out on getting a full design done, and then we will need to bid it. We'll have to bid it very specifically to the FEMA requirements, and then probably in the neighborhood of about 4 months of replacement work. Now, if for some reason any of that were to fall through, we could always go back to the repair, but we're probably, 6 to 8 months realistically away from doing this. But at the same time, that'd be $1.5 million that FEMA would help us cover and identified in our long-term master plan.
And is that money that we would have to spend and then get reimbursed by FEMA, or is that money that they would send us directly?
I would really like to be able to answer that question. It's not clear. One of the things I have indicated is that they would fund the engineering up front. So we can request that money up front, which is, I haven't finalized that number yet, but it's $120,000 to $150,000, somewhere in that neighborhood for the design work. It does sound like some of the things they will help provide funding for in advance. So I think we're going to be, it is likely that they would provide the money for that, but I cannot tell you that with certainty at this point.
Okay.
Just because we don't have that answer from FEMA yet. We've asked.
Yeah. Well, I know I know, that sounds like it could be a little while before we get this sorted. I just want to be sure that we're communicating to the public about that, and particularly the people that live in that area. And if there's a way that we could, I know this is probably not the norm for us, but if there's a way we could actually post an update physically near that the barricades, I think that might be helpful in terms of communicating and educating the public on what we're working on it, and that we're actively engaged in trying to fix that. It is for some people it's kind of out of the way. You may not know, but I see it every single day, and I know a lot of other people have to change their route home or other places. So it does have an impact, and I think we owe it to the public to communicate to them about that. So
I think we can find a way to do that. We're also coordinating with Tyree and trying to make sure that in the Rosenwald committee is shared as well. But I think we can figure out some way to do that. We'll have to figure out how to do it where it's a simple enough message to make sense and yet gives the full story.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I know we've talked a lot about tax reevaluation, but I'm going to bring it up again. I think we do need sort of an ongoing effort to study that. And I just wanted to mention that there's a firm that operates out of Asheville called Urban 3 that I know that Aaron is familiar with. And they've actually studied inequity in tax valuations in Buncombe County and other places. So I would recommend that staff maybe reach out to them, and there could be others, but that's one nearby that I'm familiar with that might be willing to help us study that issue and educate us about how other municipalities have tackled that issue nationwide. So
They call what?
Urban 3.
Urban 3.
Yeah. And I think those are all my comments.
Mr. Attorney?
Just a reminder, unfortunately, that there are 3 closed sessions for this evening, but they should be reasonably, 2 of them should be reasonably brief.
Madam Clerk?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Talking about housing, I have executed one of the directions that you gave me a month ago, and that is I've signed the loan documents for Fairhaven Meadows. I got to say, I had to take a breath before I signed that one because it was committing $1 million. But I signed it, I sent it, it's closed, and that's happening. So hopefully there will be a groundbreaking out there soon that we will all be invited to. So stay tuned for more information on that.
All right, just a couple of things. One, I believe you should see green lights on our building out there, I think, right? Public Works, there's green. And that is because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And every year we light up our building in green to show our support for that. And although it's important for everybody, I think for our community, the fact that we recently have had a tragedy with some of our youth taking their lives just makes it even that more important that we really take time to raise our awareness, that we get rid of the stigma attached to mental health, and that if you see somebody that you think is struggling that needs help, please, please help them reach out to people that are trained to provide that help. So that's why City Hall is now green for the month of May. I'm happy to report that we were very successful in our poetry contest, which you may remember I encouraged you all to enter. But we got, I think, over 60 entries. And we will be having a ceremony on Saturday at 4 p.m. at the Mary C. Jenkins Community Center. This was the America 250th American Revolution poetry contest. And so all 4 categories, they'll be reading their poems. And I believe we're also going to honor the winners, and we're going to either read their poems, have them read their poems at the White Squirrel Weekend Festival at noon on that Saturday, when we're going to have another 250th celebration event going on at that ceremony. More on that as we get more details on that. But great job. I can't wait to hear the poems from the kids. It's always, they always do a really, really great job. I just want to commend staff. Great job, the budget. This was a tough year, guys. This was tough. We've heard the comments. We've listened carefully to everything people have raised. And I agree totally that looking at this reevaluation and how it's done, and looking at what we can do as a city to push back to the county, instead of just having each individual homeowner go in, but going back as a city and saying, we need this looked at, in total, right here. I mean, this is causing a problem. We had an entire community show up tonight and tell us how this is not sustainable. So I know staff, the attorney, if we can look into how we can actually go to the county and ask for a revaluation in a particular area of town, if that's possible. And again, I'm so thrilled. We're moving forward with 2 affordable housing projects. That has been one of our top priorities for so long. And we've done an awful lot of planning, an awful lot of work. And now we are moving into actually groundbreaking and construction. I think we'll all be just so thrilled. We'll set that up as soon as possible. And I think every one of us will be out there with a shovel. So with that, I think it's been a very long night, and we're going to go into our 3 closed sessions. So I need a motion to go into closed session for pending litigation, NCDOT versus the cottages at Brevard.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are now in closed session. Please clear the room, and please stop the broadcast.